All right, lads. I'll give you Blackbeard's honest opinion. You ask me, can this new captain promise you a life of prizes, plunder, and adventure? Aye. For amongst all the gentlemen of fortune sailing these West Indies, he ranks amongst the most clever. There was a time when I thought myself the deadliest scourge of these seas. But this man is a fearsome dog that feeds off trouble and turmoil. I seen him clear the deck of a Spanish galleon like it were nothing. Fighting like a devil, dressed as a man. And he's a canny one. Knows his way round every crag and crevice of these islands. So if it's fortune and adventure you seek, then Captain Edward Kenway's your man. Only, don't meddle in his private affairs. For there's more mystery to that man than even I dare ask.
Hello and welcome to another stream of Assassin's Creed Black Flag. The reason the music was off is on purpose. The Phase 6 playthrough to focus on the story. I've got the music turned off to make the dialogue stand out more. We're still very early in the story, but the purpose of this playthrough is to not just play through the story and then be done with it, but actually analyze events, characters, cutscenes, story elements, all that kind of stuff. So let's jump back into it. Okay, so we're still in Havana. There's another mission in Havana that we need to do. There won't be any sea shanties in this playthrough, because sea shanties can actually start playing even in scripted dialogue scenes within memories. So I've turned the sea shanties off for that purpose, so that they don't play at all, to allow the dialogue between characters to be able to be heard without interruption. Hey there, Tech. How's things? Hope it's going well. I'm reading character entries and all that kind of stuff as well as going over present day things. So that's all part of it too. Hello, fellas. That deals with them. Alright, so I need to try and remember exactly what I was up to. Okay, so we've already covered the present day point where you automatically get taken out of it at the start after a certain amount of memories have already been done. And then I've gone around and I've checked out all the NPCs and tried to get as much of the dialogue and all that kind of stuff. The post-it notes that you find around the offices, I'm going to be doing those as well, but I'm going to wait until I've actually got all of them before reading them out. That'll just make things easier. Tech, you passed your eye test by the skin of your teeth, which is a big deal because you're a visual inspector dealing with classified work. Oh. Well, I'm glad that you still passed it. That would have been a bit stressful and also, a bit anxiety-inducing Because, yeah, if you're working in a job that requires you to be able to, number one, see things clearly, but also be able to still make out what things are and all that kind of stuff. So that's good that you passed it, Tech.
Si la limpieza es sinónimo de santidad.
That's right, this one is over here.
Se habrá dado un golpe.
And I think I also covered, I mean, I can actually just exit the Animus and double check this stuff, which I'll do this now. But I'm pretty sure that I've looked at the main character's messages as well. Just have a look. No active mission log messages. Okay, so some more have popped up. So this is from Chloe Lesney. Welcome to the team. We should have lunch sometime, once you're settled. Evan Dean. Welcome aboard. Ahoy, mate. Welcome to the good ship Abstergo Entertainment, where everything is always jolly and we all love our work to death. Glad to have you aboard. I hope you're fun. The last guy was a little dull and, well, just kidding. See you around. M.O. Boudreau. Nice to meet you. I don't know if I'm actually saying that name correctly, but the only reason I'm saying it that way is because the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie Hard Target, there's a character with the last name Boudreau, so I don't know if it's the same spelling. I just wanted to say it's so good having a new face on the team. This is a great place to work, but some people can get a little negative at times, if you know what I mean. Let's get a coffee later. John from IT. Hey, John here. Nice meeting you. If you have any problems with your Animus, feel free to shoot me a message. I don't extend this privilege to everyone, but Melanie tells me you know your stuff. Good enough for me. Tech, if you'd failed, you would have gotten your work 1% reviewed. If that failed, it would have been a 10% review, then a 100% review. Needless to say that you're making an eye appointment. That's a really good idea, Tech, as well. Because some people would just be like, oh, I passed the test, I don't need to worry. But it's good that you want to actually get your eyes checked, just in case there's something that's going on behind the scenes that you don't know yet that could be rectified. And if you didn't go to get it checked at the time that you're wanting to, then who knows how long it could have gone on. So the next test is in a year, is it? Well, that's good too, that you've at least got a year's worth of time until the next one. Because I imagine if it was like a monthly thing or a bi-monthly kind of thing, that'd be definitely a lot of stress to deal with. I just need to make sure that I'm reading all this stuff in present day. So I'll just put a present day entries as the thing in my notes. So we read Melanie LeMay. Bienvenue. Just want to check something for a moment. Be right back. I've got my fan going at full blast, and I was worried that the sound of it was actually interfering with the microphone. Okay, so Chloe Lesney. Hello there. Evan Dean. I'll also put what their actual topic was, just in case they're characters that send you messages again. M.O. Pedro. Nice to meet you. Alright, so we've covered that. Diary, let's have a look. Alright, work diary, week 1. My first day at work, and I've been assigned to the most prestigious project in the company, the Sample 17 project. My job is to research the life of the pirate Edward Kenway and find promising footage for use in future Abstergo products. Sample 17 executive producer Melanie LeMay is a passionate and energetic leader, and the company's CCO, Olivier Garneau, seems like a fun guy. I can't wait to settle in and get to work. Because this is a story analysis, let's analyze the present day story up until this point. We haven't yet gotten the video of Desmond, so I won't cover that part yet. But let's just focus on the main character that we're playing as. So the main character that we're playing as is you, essentially. That's what Ubisoft were going for. They want you to think that you are the Abstergo employee, putting you, yourself, into the shoes of this character. On one hand, it's a great way for people who haven't played the games before this one, and this is their first game. It's a good way to be able to convey that there's a present day story without needing the player to have actually played the present day story up until this point. Because the way that they've done this present day story is, it does have ties to what happened at the end of Assassin's Creed 3, of course, but it primarily is showing a new perspective. And that's basically what this game is when you look at the present day and also the past with Edward Kenway and all that. It's a new perspective on the series. And as part of that process, creating a character in present day that doesn't have a name, doesn't have a voice, you don't see what they look like. When you look in the mirror, you can't see the character's face. There's no documents or photos that the character has in their personal effects of themselves, or you can't go to your mobile phone and check your Facebook or whatever it would be in the Assassin's Creed universe, probably Facebook still, and see, oh look, the main character's checking into their Facebook and there's their photo. You don't see them at all. You don't see them, you don't hear them, you don't ever get a name for them. So the perspective is, how about we have a character that people don't have to know beforehand. The bad side to that is that people who have played the present day games, well, I shouldn't put it that way, because that implies that there's games in the series that are strictly present day. For those who haven't played Assassin's Creed 1, 2, Brotherhood, Revelations, and 3, and tracked the present day story through those games, for those who have, when you get to Black Flag, it's a bit of a gamble having a present day character that no one knows. And at the time that they did this game, and who knows what they had planned, maybe originally they planned to reveal what the main character looked like. Maybe they wanted to have some kind of continuation. I think there's a theory that the character that you play as in present day, is the same character that you play as in Rogue. The only reason I would sort of doubt that is because there didn't seem to be any pre-acknowledgement from the main character about anything. You know what I mean? Didn't seem to be any diary entries or anything where the character was like, I tried working for Sean and Rebecca, but it didn't work out, so I continued to work for Abstergo, and I hear that they're actually Templars, and I want in on that. There's nothing like that where the main character says that. So I like to think that the main character that is in this game, in present day, either gets moved somewhere else, i.e. they get promoted to be somewhere else in Abstergo, or whatever. So that would have been interesting actually to do a game where you play as the same present day protagonist as you do in this game, except you're working for the assassins this time, and you're going in and infiltrating and all that kind of stuff. So the present day in this game not having a character that has a face or a name, it is a double-edged sword. It's good for people who were new to the series before getting to this game, so they didn't have to worry about knowing what happened in the previous games with present day. But it was also bad for people who had actually already done that, because then they're like, well, what are you giving us to chew on as fans of the series? And present day is a very tricky thing, and it always has been. It's been there since day one. Understandably, though, there's people that are like, I don't care about present day. Present day, not interested in. I'm just solely interested in the past. And it's understandable for people to be like, I hate when the game takes you out of the past and puts you into the present day. They tried to compromise with that along the way, where it's like, there will be some points. For example, in this game, there are points where you get pulled out of the Animus automatically because they want to be telling a story with present day. But for the majority of the time, and it's not the first game in the series to do this, but for the majority of the time, you can just decide when you want to go out of the Animus and when you don't want to, and all that kind of stuff. And it would seem that Ubisoft over the years has slowly started to listen more to the people who don't like present day, and is starting to come up with ways to make it that present day is either very minimal, i.e. Assassin's Creed Mirage, with only the opening narration and that's it, or not having it in there at all. And they have done games where the present day wasn't in it kind of at all. The Chronicles trilogy of games. In China, in India, and for the majority of Russia, in those 3 Chronicles games, there's no present day story that you are experiencing. It's only in the Russia game, if you've gotten all the codes from China, India, and Russia, and then you input the codes in the Russia game, that you get a present day cutscene that acts as like an after credits kind of thing. That's when they bring in the present day, and they mention the Phoenix Project, which is setting up Assassin's Creed. Is it Unity with the Phoenix Project? I think it is, or it might be Syndicate. Anyway, there's a Phoenix Project that gets alluded to in Chronicles Russia if you get the passwords in Chronicles China, India, and the game Russia as well, and input them in. You get a cutscene with Otso Berg, and I think it's not Violet da Costa. Shit, I can't remember the character's name. It could be Violet da Costa, but I don't think it is. But anyway, he gets sent to go see Dr. Alvaro Gramatica, and he's a character that you see in Syndicate. He probably was in the comics before, maybe, I don't know, because there's a lot of comic books that have been written over the years, and I'm not a comic book reader, so the only time I find out about Assassin's Creed comic story stuff is when someone points out, oh, this person was in this comic, or I've gone and I've done some reading, and then I'm like, oh, okay, so this character is someone that was introduced in the comics. Like, there's a character named Galena who appears in Syndicate. I didn't know who she was before playing that game. And then when she turns up, I'm just like, oh, okay, maybe they're just introducing a new present-day assassin character that maybe in the next game they might follow through on. But no, it just turns out they were someone that was in the comics first, and then they put them in that game as kind of like a cameo kind of appearance sort of thing. There's something happened between her and Sean. I think it's implied maybe that either he has some feelings for her or she has some feelings for him, or something like that. I don't know exactly what they were trying to convey. It had that kind of feel to it, but maybe I'm over complicating stuff or misreading into it. I haven't read the comics, so I don't know the ins and outs of all the comics characters that have been introduced since day one, since the very first Assassin's Creed comic, who have never been in the games, or maybe sometimes in the games. There's just so much stuff. I primarily stick with the games, and I'm a big movie buff, so I'm going to see the movie anyway. So I saw the movie of Assassin's Creed. I do like series stuff, but I don't go out of my way to go for it. So it would have to be really, really interesting looking and really good to draw me in to watch an Assassin's Creed series. But we don't have one yet to actually look at as an example. But the present day story in this game is definitely intended to be primarily for people who have played the games before as well, because there's a lot of stuff in here that's referencing things like characters from the other games and stuff. But it's also something that people who hadn't played the games before this one can sink their teeth into a little bit. So yeah, we never see this character, we never find out what they look like, we never hear their voice, and we never see. We never, have any idea of the character. So Ubisoft was like, we'll just make the character be someone that players can put themselves in the shoes of. Hey there, Star. I hope it's going well. So I've covered the diary. So I need to make sure that I cover that in my notes. Welcome to Abstergo Entertainment. I'd rather work at LJN, to be honest. Okay, and I've also read Employee Passport. I think anyway. Let's have a look. Have I already read it? I have. It's not that much anyway. Yeah, I've already read that. Not going to reread stuff I've already read. Okay, I'm satisfied now that I've done the first present day section to its fullest as far as NPCs are concerned and reading stuff. These post-it notes, I will be collecting them, but I'm going to stagger when I collect them. I'm not going to start collecting them yet. Let's jump back into the Animus. Star, it is. You're debating on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but you can't move at the moment. Ah. If only you could click your fingers and it would automatically appear in your hands. That would definitely work out well. Okay, so we're not in a main memory at the moment, which means there's no NPC dialogue I need to hang around and listen to. Just to reiterate as well, there's no music on purpose. I've turned the music off so that cutscenes and any dialogue happening throughout the game's story can be heard without any music playing over the top of it. And before I do the next memory, I will do a recap of where we're up to in the story. Right, your cat could stay comfy and you can have food. That's true. Yeah, if you've got a cat that's on you and the cat is like, this is where you are going to stay for a little bit because I want to stay here for a little bit kind of thing. Okay, so here is the last sequence recap. Sequence 1, Prologue, in which our hero, the notorious pirate Edward Kenway, acquired for himself a disguise and a purpose. The deliverance of a letter, maps, and a strange crystal cube to the governor of Havana, in exchange for a perceived reward. Here too was a merchant named Stede Bonnet, befriended, paired up. The two set sail for the Spanish capital, Havana. Memory 1. Edward has found himself in a bit of trouble. His only aim is to survive against all odds and all attacks. Sequence 2, Memory 1. Lively Havana. Edward, pretending to be the assassin Duncan Walpole, is following Stede in search of a place to stay before his risky meeting with the governor. Memory 2. And My Sugar? The maps Edward hoped to sell to Governor Torres have been seized by guards, find where they have been taken, and recover them. And the most recent memory was Mr. Walpole, I presume. Disguised as the assassin Duncan Walpole, Edward must deliver various maps in a strange crystal cube to the governor of Havana. Star, your tortoiseshell is asleep in your lap. Purring away, I imagine.
Hello!
Oh, just to show an example. If you see the screen freeze like this, it isn't a glitch and it's not the game crashing. On the PlayStation, if you want to do like take a screenshot, or if you want to start a broadcast if you're streaming and want to end the stream or anything like that, there's a button on the PlayStation controller that you press, and it brings up the options for those things, but it freezes the game screen. And so I'm using this function on the PlayStation 5 to allow me to pause a cutscene when I want to talk about something in it, and when I want to analyze it, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you see the screen go like this, it's not because the game is crashing, it's because I'm doing it on purpose so I can talk about the cutscene, or whatever's happening in the game at the time. Star, yep, and letting you play
Duncan.
with her pause. Oh, that's cool.
Good morning, Duncan. Just over here. Edward? Hello, Edward. I found a man to purchase my remaining sugar. Huh? Quite a coup, I must say.
He just called you Edward.
Oh, that's the merchant who sailed me here.
Out of caution, I gave him a false name.
Ah, well done.
Alright, so just to recap what has been happening with Edward. So at the start of the game, Edward is on a ship and the captain gets killed. And the quartermaster, or whoever is the most in charge, or whoever is, you know, whatever character they ask Edward to get on the helms and you know, control the ship. There's another ship that they're fighting against, and on that ship is an assassin named Duncan Walpole. Unbeknownst to the assassins, he is actually betraying the assassins to become a Templar. And so he's pretending to be this Duncan. He ends up killing Duncan on the island that they were on, and he takes the outfit not because he knows anything about the assassins and the Templars, but simply because he's wearing rags and Duncan is wearing this much better outfit in comparison, which is the assassin outfit. When he actually looks and searches through Duncan's belongings after killing him, he actually finds a letter, some maps, and a strange cube as well. And these are the things that the assassin was delivering to the Templars in Havana. And Edward, because he wants to get rich any way he can, he sees in this an opportunity to potentially make a lot of money. When he reads the note, Governor Torres, who is the head of the Templars, who actually sent the letter to Duncan, mentions that he doesn't know Duncan's face, but he knows his outfit. So Edward is lucky in the fact that the Templars don't know what Duncan Walpole actually looks like. So he goes to the governor's mansion and he meets two other Templars, or would-be Templars, who are about to become initiated, Julian Ducasse and Woodes Rogers. And Woodes Rogers has a wife. Years before, his wife had met Duncan Walpole at some ball or some dinner or some party or something like that. And Woodes Rogers follows that up with saying, well, Woodes Rogers says to Edward that she said that Duncan, you know, was devilishly handsome. And then he follows it up with, obviously a lie to stoke my jealousy. So Edward's cover is still intact. So he's still able to make them think that he's Duncan Walpole. Anyway, he meets Julian Ducasse as well. They go and meet Torres. Torres doesn't know what Duncan looks like by face, so he doesn't know that Edward is pretending to be Duncan Walpole. And so Edward has become embroiled in the Assassin-Templar conflict, but still doesn't understand what that actually means. All he wants to do is get money and all that kind of stuff. Stede Bonnet is a character that he met on that same island where he killed Duncan Walpole. And he told Stede that his name was actually Duncan. And then later he says to Stede, Duncan was only just a fake name that I used because I'm on a mission from the king and I needed to have a secret name. And so Stede then knows that his actual name is Edward. We have the situation here where Edward is meeting Woodes Rogers again, and Stede, of course, is yelling out, "Hey, Edward! Edward!" So it's another moment where Edward's cover as Duncan is almost blown. But he says to Woodes Rogers that he gave Stede the fake name Edward out of caution. And then Woodes Rogers is satisfied with that and says, he basically said, that's a good idea kind of thing, and walks off. So Edward is very fucking lucky, but that luck's going to run out eventually though. But at this point, he's still lucky that all along the way, he still managed to convince the Templars that he actually is Duncan Walpole. And it almost came unraveled under what Stede was saying. But Edward is a quick thinker. He's able to think on his feet very quickly, and so he just comes up with telling Woodes Rogers that he told Stede Bonnet a fake name, i.e. Edward, to, out of caution. So it's ironic, the flip, right? So Edward lies to Stede Bonnet by saying he's Duncan, but then he tells the truth and says that he's actually Edward. and then he tells the lie to the Templars that he's Duncan, and then he tells the lie to the Templars that he used the fake name Edward. So I like how that sort of like jumped from one thing to the next, and that's why I wanted to stop the scene where I stopped it, just to go over that. And so Edward's very lucky that Steed didn't blow his cover as Duncan. But Edward's luck will definitely run out soon. Hey there, Zereth. I have the Lara costume available. Thanks for letting me know. Let's deactivate that. Boom. There we go. Lara's outfit. Thanks for redeeming the old man impression.
Hello there. Okay, let's have a look at something. I've got some knowledge to impart. Let's see. You fight like a dairy farmer. How appropriate. You fight like a cow. This is the end for you, you gutter-crawling cur. And I've got a little tip for you. Get the point? I've spoken with apes more polite than you. I'm glad to hear you attended your family reunion. Soon you'll be wearing my sword like a shish kebab. First, you'd better stop waving it like a feather duster. People fall at my feet when they see me coming. Even before they smell your breath. I'm not going to take your insolence sitting down. Your hemorrhoids are flaring up again, eh? I once owned a dog that was smarter than you. He must have taught you everything you know. Nobody's ever drawn blood from me, and nobody ever will. You run that fast. Have you stopped wearing diapers yet? Why? Did you want to borrow one? There are no words for how disgusting you are. Yes, there are. You just never learned them. You make me want to puke. You make me think somebody already did. My handkerchief will wipe up your blood. So, you got that job as janitor after all. I got this scar on my face during a mighty struggle. I hope now you've learned to stop picking your nose. I've heard you are a contemptible sneak. Too bad no one's ever heard of you at all. You're no match for my brains, you poor fool. I'd be in real trouble if you ever used them. And one more, you have the manners of a beggar. I wanted to make sure you'd feel comfortable with me. There we go. Thank you so much for that, Zereth. He Edward's like a dairy farmer? That doesn't fit. That doesn't match. What are you doing?
Thank you, Zereth, for redeeming the old man impression. Hey there, Brutus. I hope it's going well. You did, Brutus. Good timing. Absolutely, you definitely did. Yes, I started a playthrough of Tomb Raider 2013 yesterday, doing a bow only and no upgrade / skills challenge, and I had a channel point reward where someone could redeem to change Lara's outfit for the rest of the stream. Hey there, Zomb. Any another type of lore outside of the game or in a document you haven't found, type reason provided for the real Duncan Walpole's defection? No idea, actually, Zomb. like, it does mention something. I'm not going to reread it because I've already read it, but it mentions something in his database entry about his life before he became an assassin. And the only thing they really mention is that the assassins never saw him again. But they don't really go into the ins and outs and reasons why he actually defected that I know of anywhere else. One of my favorite quotes in that Zereth with the shopkeeper is when you ask him to go and do something, like I think it's when you go to ask him to go see the Sword Master of Mealy Island. I like how one of the things he can says is,
And don't put your lips on anything.
"It's going great, Brutus." Excellent, that's really good. I'm glad to hear that you're going well. And I am as well. I'm going good, thank you. Thanks for asking.
We'll catch up on it later.
Very punctual, Duncan. This way. Here he is. A man both Templars and Assassins have sought for over a decade. I am told your surname is Roberts. Is this so? You recognize this, I think.
Alright, the reason I wanted to stop there is because this is probably as good of a close-up that I'm going to get of the actual glass vial. So Duncan Walpole, one of the items that he had on him that the Templars wanted was a glass vial. And what these glass vials do is when someone's blood is put inside of it, and then that vial is put inside the observatory device. Using that observatory device, they can actually see through the eyes of whoever's blood is inside the vial, and they can also hear what the person is actually hearing. And so this character, the Sage, Bartholomew Roberts, he has blood in him that the Templars want because his blood is required to access the observatory itself. So the Templars want to get in there themselves, but they can't unless they have the Sage's blood. The Sage is actually not fully human. He's also got a large concentration of Isu, or the ones who came before DNA, in his body, because he, back when the Isu were ruling the world, he is the husband of Juno, another Isu that we meet before this game. And one of the experiments that was performed to try and make the Isu be immortal or to live beyond the catastrophe that was going to befall them was to do a kind of like transference in some way. And so Juno made it that her husband would be reborn throughout the centuries and keep being reborn in human form, in a human body, until the time when he is able to free Juno from the Grey, which is where she's been trapped for centuries and centuries and all that kind of stuff. So Bartholomew Roberts is just one of many humans throughout history that have had the Aita, which is the name of Juno's husband. He's just one of many humans throughout history that have had Aita reborn inside of him. And so that's another reason why the Templars really, really want him, but also because they need access to the observatory. And the only way to get that is to get his blood and put it in one of these vials and then access the observatory and then potentially see through his eyes to see, where he's going to be and all that kind of stuff. And the Templars want to use this overall as a way to control people, right? They want to use it like a big, massive surveillance system. And they want to have all Templars to give their blood as well, so that all Templars can be monitored. And anything that they see and hear can be heard and seen by, whoever's in charge of the Templars and all that kind of stuff. So that's what this glass vial is. They're getting the blood of Bartholomew Roberts here so that they can access the observatory, because only a Sage has the blood in them to actually access the observatory. Zereth, that's vile. Observatory. Why are we looking at plants? That is a good call, Zereth. Observatory. Zom, you eat a what? You eat a what? Not sure.
According to old tales, the blood of a sage is required to enter the observatory.
We have the key. Now we need only its location. Perhaps Mr. Roberts will be eager to provide it. Transfer him to my residence.
Such a fuss over one man. Is the observatory really such a grand prize?
Sí, sin duda. The observatory was a tool built by the precursor race. Its worth is without measure.
Precursor race? I see.
Alright, so Edward is treading a fine line here still. Because he doesn't know what Duncan Walpole knew. So when Torres mentions the precursor race, which is also known as the ones who came before, or also known as the Isu, which is ISU, is how that's spelt. Edward doesn't know what Duncan knows, so he doesn't know whether or not Duncan already knows this stuff, so it's very risky for Edward, pretending to be Duncan, to not actually know what the Templar is talking about. But again, he doesn't know what Duncan knows, and we don't know what Duncan knows either. So for all we know, Duncan doesn't know what the precursor race is, but maybe he does. And if he did, and Edward pretending to be him doesn't outwardly or 100% come across as genuine, i.e. acting like he knows what is being talked about, that's very risky. So he's very, very lucky that they don't pick up on that and be like, hey, don't you remember we sent you a letter, months ago talking about this? The letter before the letter that Edward actually found, So we don't know. So Edward is very, very lucky in this situation here where they're talking about the precursor race to sort of like be like, precursor race, yes. So imagine having to pretend to know something like you do already know it, even though you're hearing it for the first time, Like if someone was to give you new information you hadn't heard of and you were on the spot and they were expecting you to react in the way that the person who already knows would react, like how would you react, And that's what Edward is sort of facing here with the talk about the precursor race. Harbinger, thank you so much for the lurk. Zereth, you know a know to know what to know when you know. I know.
¿Oh, sí?
One of your early letters mentioned a desire to kill the Mayan mentor, Atabai. Were you able to carry out this contract before coming here?
I was not, no. Too many complications along the way.
A pity. But the maps you delivered with the blood vial will see that job finished.
Aye. That's the idea.
Alright, so they did send him letters before that letter that Edward read. So he's damn fucking lucky that in those other letters they may not have actually gone into detail about the precursor race. But Edward has something else here where a new piece of information that Edward didn't know about was that Duncan was asked by the Templars to actually assassinate Artabai. We haven't met him yet in the story at this point, but Artabai is actually the head of the assassins in this whole area of the West Indies and the Caribbean and all that sort of location. And so Duncan was tasked with killing Artabai. And Edward, because as I said, he's someone who can think quickly on his feet and he's able to come up with something on the spot that is actually going to be accepted by Torres, he comes up with saying, there was too many complications in the way, so I wasn't able to. Now, the maps that Torres mentioned are actually showing the exact locations of the assassin bureaus throughout the West Indies. So for those who are new to the series, the assassins have these bureaus around wherever they're located. And these bureaus act as like a headquarters. And they go there to socialize with each other is one thing that they can do, trade information that they've learned, or they can go there to get permission if they're a lower ranking assassin, they can get permission from the Rafik there. In Assassin's Creed 1's time period, it was a Rafik, and I think in Mirage as well. But in this game, the bureaus are represented by the Templar hunt missions, and we haven't got to that point yet where that comes into the story, but essentially there's assassin bureaus throughout the West Indies, and the map that Duncan had actually shows the Templars where all those encampments actually are, including the location of where Artabai is. So Edward doesn't realize yet how much his continuing Duncan's intention to betray the assassins, Edward doesn't realize the repercussions that are going to happen because of that, and that is part of his journey through the game story as well. So yeah, he's presented with the information about, we sent in one of our earlier letters, you mentioned the desire to kill Artabai. Did you actually do that? He's like, no, there was too many complications along the way. And Torres accepts that and is like, okay, well, that's all right. The maps that you delivered us will see that job done anyway. So Edward is again lucky that at this point they still haven't figured out that he's not actually Duncan as well. Zereth, a letter for me. Okay, let's see. How about Q? Is that a good letter for you? Zomb, sus pause is sus. Yeah, I'm using the PlayStation 5 screenshot function to actually pause the game screen for me, which is coming in handy for this playthrough when I want to talk about stuff that happens in dialogue or in events that happen in cutscenes and gameplay and all that kind of stuff for this story-focused playthrough. So yeah, whenever you see the screen go like this, I'm simply pressing the button on the PlayStation 5 controller that brings up the option for taking a screenshot or save recent gameplay or start new recording or go into your broadcast options or share screen or capture options. So I'm actually in that menu, and it allows me to still have my voice come through over the stream when it's paused as well. So yeah, whenever you see me pausing it like this, I'm simply pressing that button on the PlayStation. If you just want to take a screenshot without going into that menu, you hold down the same button. But to access the menu that I've got open, you just press the button once and it'll go in. It's not 100% accurate. Sometimes I'll press the button and it'll take a couple of split seconds for it to pause. So sometimes I haven't been able to pause the screen on what I've wanted to focus on. For example, there was a facial expression that Stede Bonnet does, which I absolutely wanted to have in freeze frame, but I wasn't able to catch it in time because by the time I pressed the button, that moment had already passed before the game actually recognized that I'd pressed the button to do that. Oh, Zom, you were talking about Edward pausing before answering Torres' question. I gotcha, yeah. That's actually a good point too, because anytime someone is being asked something and they have a pause, it's definitely leaving potential for the other person to go, hang on, something's off here. So yeah, Edward is definitely lucky that his hesitation to answer straight away wasn't something that made Torres just say to everyone, okay, just stop for a moment, and ask Edward further questions. Because this is the whole thing, right? Like, Edward hasn't been grilled by the Templars. If they suspected that he wasn't Duncan, they'd be asking more questions than what they've asked. They'd be more thorough in their questioning. But they haven't been that thorough because Edward has been able to maintain this facade that he's actually Duncan, which it'll end, of course, as part of the story. But for as long as it lasted, him pretending to be Duncan, he's very, very lucky he got away with as much as he did as well. Zereth, he's like a cat because of his paws. That's a good one, Zereth.
I don't like this route, Torres. We're exposed.
Something is wrong. Stay close, Grandmaster.
I feel it too. Do not let them get their hands on the sage, at whatever cost.
Assassins! Above! They're on the rooftops!
No soy una amenaza. Yo no tengo nada que ver. Tengo que largarme de aquí.
Watch the streets and alleys. They could be anywhere.
Aquí, Mil.
¡Maldita sea!
Maldita sea la suerte.
Kashantu Bakpach, to Telep. Protect the sage!
¡No se mueva!
Dios, ayuda a tu fiel sierva en su hora de haga.
That glitch when the dude tackled me made Edward fly.
Por favor.
Zonkitech. ¡Sangre! No pienso quedarme aquí a mirar cómo...
Me marcho.
Stop him!
You're a nimble one, I'll give you that.
Pareces tenso. Un caballero de su categoría acompañarme.
Hang back and make this easy on both of us, mate.
Una compañía ejemplar, orgullosa.
Si te gustan las cortinas,
Stop, or I'll kneecap you.
Hacer mi último servicio durante un tiempo. Aún no he visto a mi hijo que va a cumplir 3 años.
Felicito,
mi
señorita.
padre
Vamos, canalla. Coge a tu
Buena
prostituta
técnica.
y vete.
Todo una...
¿querría un caballero de su categoría acompañarme al callejón?
Alright, so there doesn't seem to be any more dialogue
Eso dicen. Pero cuando
while
fui a la
chasing him.
tienda, no quedaba nada salvo lo-
Well done, lapdog.
Quiet.
We'll see him to the prisons, Grand Master.
Double the watch.
Well, I'll be buggered. What an active day we've had, gents.
See, beset on all sides by our enemies, we must be more cautious.
I do wish I could remain to see our drama done, but I must avail myself of these winds and sail for England.
By all means, Captain, speed and fortune to you.
With luck, I'll return myself a governor. And with my idiot king's blessing, no less. Adios.
As for you, Mr. Walpole, I consider this the first payment in a long-term investment. Gracias.
Obliged.
I would like you to be present for the interrogation tomorrow. Call around noon.
Yes, sir.
Alright, so that look on Edward's face, let's analyze that for a second. Okay, so Edward, after taking the identity of Duncan and knowing that there's a reward, was expecting a much bigger payout than what he just got there. And so he pretends to Torres's face to be in thanks for the money that he's been given, but he feels it and he knows that it's not heavy enough for his liking, which means obviously that there's not as much money in there as he was hoping. And so when Torres walks off, he gives him this look because he knows that Torres isn't watching, and he gives him the look of someone that's like, so Edward is pissed off that he didn't get as much money as he was hoping. And by an extension of that, it means that if he was to stick with being Duncan for a long time, like months and months and months, maybe Edward would have ended up getting a lot of money down the line, but he really wants a lot of money quickly. And so basically Edward is just like, great, you know. So when we go and meet Stede Bonnet, Edward will actually talk about how displeased he is with the amount of money that he was just given. And that spurs him to actually want to go and investigate the Sage himself and find out what Roberts knows, and all that kind of stuff. But that's actually something that is his undoing, because that's when they find out that he actually wasn't Duncan all along. Zomb, you actually did things more sus in your current playthrough at this point. You went out of the way to beat up the assassins without usage of weapons during this part, in spite of the fact Edward has no reason to be on their side at this time. Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Like, he's defecting, like Duncan was defecting to the Templars. So if Duncan had actually survived and it was him here doing this, I don't think that Duncan would have wanted to make the Templars doubt him. So I don't know if Edward would... I don't know if Duncan would just knock them out as opposed to kill them. Artabai does mention that Edward murdered their brothers and sisters in Havana. So the story does acknowledge and confirm that Edward did indeed kill assassins during this encounter as well. But I've done playthroughs where I haven't actually killed them. I've, used fists and stuff like that to do that, because I'm, on the assassin side of things in this series. I don't like the Templars. So I did that once, but that was only a one-off type of playthrough. But yeah, it is confirmed that Edward killed those assassins during that memory.
Bueno, es mejor que estar en el mar con la única...
Hey Sheila Locke, welcome on in. It's going well, thank you. It's going really good. Having a good weekend. How's things going with you?
¡Alto ahí!
Podremos pescar los más grandes durante todo el año.
Bueno, de primera, excelente. Señor, domina su naturaleza. Si tienen intención de comprar...
Señor, le ruego que...
Cangrejos, oiga, 2 la unidad o 10 el lote. Y si le llevan una a la costa,
Alright, so the previous memory was a man they called the Sage. In anticipation of getting his reward, Edward must meet the Templars near the docks. Current memory, Memory 5, claiming what's due. Disappointed with the size of his reward, Edward decides to infiltrate Torres's compound and rescue the man called the Sage.
Join me for a drink, Edward.
God sink me for this pittance. 1,000 reals for those maps. That's what? £100 at most. How's a man supposed to become rich in these times with a miser like Torres running the world?
Have you ever worked on a plantation before?
You know what I'm thinking? I'd like to see this observatory the governor's going on about. He said it were like a device that could follow people around and show where they were.
A ludicrous idea. Imagine my wife with such an advantage over me.
And imagine what a thing like that'd be worth. Sell that to the right person and I'd be the richest pirate. Privateer in the West Indies. I'll catch you up, Bonnet. There's a sage in that house I must speak to in private.
Alright, just want to pause it there. Alright, so in that cutscene, Edward is obviously pissed off that he only got a pittance, in his words, for what he did. And so he's complaining about that. And he's also complaining about Torres and his ilk and all that kind of stuff. And Stede is kind of like almost offering Edward a job there, Like, that was his intro. That's why he asks Edward, have you ever worked on a plantation before? Because Stede Bonnet actually owns a plantation, I think. And so, because he knows that Edward is disappointed with that money, I think in some way Stede was wanting to help Edward, and maybe he was going to offer him a job or something like that. And he tells Stede about the device that was talked about. And I love Stede Bonnet's reaction, where it's like, imagine my wife with that advantage over me, and that sort of look that he gives is just so funny. And then Edward mentions the words pirate, but then corrects himself and says privateers, because he's still wanting to make Stede think that he's not actually a pirate, even though he is. And by this point, Stede is so trusting of Edward that it wouldn't matter if Edward had just straight out said pirates instead. So Stede Bonnet is still not knowing that Edward is actually a pirate yet. But when he does find out, he doesn't say anything to him later like, oh, you lied to me. He just, takes it as is and doesn't mention anything like that when we next see Stede Bonnet after everything that happens in this mission takes place. Sheila, great to hear. You just woke up and you were hoping for a stream of yours you can watch laying in bed. You didn't get disappointed, so you're good. Oh, that's excellent. That's really cool that the timing worked out like that. Zom, you find there's one circumstance in which it's better to be on the Templar side of their war, and that's when it comes to the colonial branches of the Assassins and Templars. As under the leadership of Haytham Kenway, the colonial Templars are far more noble than Achilles' assassins. Yeah, I tend to blame Rogue and the writers for coming up with the story they did for that, because in Assassin's Creed 3 we don't really get any sense of why the assassins went the way that they did in the colony. Rogue sloppily tells that story, but there's one big thing that it's overlooking, and that is what happened to Achilles. And that's why I really feel that Rogue should have been a story where Achilles rescues or finds someone when they're younger and actually becomes a mentor for them. They become an assassin, and then they get seduced by the Templars, but Achilles and the other assassins don't know it until the final part of the game, where you, as the traitorous assassin, actually kill his wife and son. That, I think, should have been why Achilles actually, went the way that he did, and why the assassins went the way that they did. But they really gloss over that in Rogue. They mention that his wife and son are dead, but they don't. That's not the focus of the story, and that's not something that they delve into strongly with Achilles. And so I think Rogue should have been like that. And then that way, all those years later, when Connor turns up to his place, when he turns up to Achilles' place, because he's been betrayed before by someone that he trained from a young age, you could then say that maybe the reason why he's a bit cautious about training Connor is because he's worried that the same thing that happened to him years ago will happen, i.e. in my version where the character that he trained to be an assassin for years ended up killing his wife and son. That's what Rogue should have been like, But I feel like Rogue and the way that they wrote it is on purposely done in a way to make the assassins act like Templars and the Templars act like assassins. And it's a very basic and very sort of like low-level way to view the two different factions. And I think that if the writers were given more time, because they weren't given a lot of time, they basically had to come up with the story in the same year in which they started actually making the game, in the same year that the game actually eventually came out in. So they were really rushed and all that kind of stuff. But I feel it's a bit unfair to judge the assassins of that era solely based on information that we've been given in Rogue. I mean, personally, I feel in Assassin's Creed 3 there's not enough information that we get given about what happened with the assassins to actually know whether or not Achilles' leadership was good or not, because there could be any number of reasons why he let things go the way that they did. But Rogue just does a quick, let's just mention it, let's just have it, and then boom, and then at the end have Achilles get shot by whatever and injure him. That's how his leg's injured. But they don't go into Achilles. So I think it would have been better in Rogue if you played as someone that he had been training since childhood to become an assassin, and then throughout the story he eventually becomes a Templar. The player knows it, but the assassins don't. And so as the assassin who's turned Templar undercover as an assassin now, you sabotage all their missions, and eventually the final mission is you have to kill Achilles' wife and son, and you do, and Achilles tries to is too late, of course, unfortunately, and in the fight that you have with Achilles, he gets injured, and that's why he's limping. And I think that would have been a better way to tell Rogue's story instead of what they went with. But I can understand why, taking Rogue into account, the game that we got, that it would would be considered that the assassins of that era weren't, they didn't have the best leadership and all that kind of stuff. So I understand where that sort of opinion's coming from. It's just I personally feel that Rogue's story was shoddily and sloppily written as well. And so that sort of means that a lot of stuff that's canon, unfortunately, is what I have to accept. But I wish they went about it very differently. Because the thing about Achilles is he's a very tragic character. Like when we meet him in Assassin's Creed 3, he comes off as this gruff exterior, doesn't want anything to do with anyone, just wants to live his life and all that. But there's definitely a lot of internalization that we don't see in AC3 that we could have seen in Rogue if they bothered to actually make that central to the storytelling of what happened. So it should have been more an origin story for Achilles in a sense, except you don't play as him though, you play as this assassin who he's trained, who turns on the assassins but doesn't reveal that straight away and is actually a double agent for the Templars in the Assassin Order. And through that we would see the effect that it had on Achilles. Kind of in a way making it like Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, where their bond is so strong that when Anakin actually turns to the dark side, it really devastates Obi-Wan a lot. And so if they did something like that in Rogue, with Achilles and the main character that becomes a Templar, and that kind of dynamic, I think that would have really fit really well with how we see Achilles years later in Assassin's Creed 3. Yeah, Zereth. Edward just giving them a boop. Very sharp boop. The boop to end all boops for that person. I mean, another way they could have done the Rogue story is have Achilles from when he was a young man being trained by the assassins actually be trained alongside another one who became his friend. And later on, when Achilles becomes the actual, leader of the assassins, the friend gets jealous, which is one of the reasons why the Templars are able to make him switch sides to be a Templar, but also be undercover as an assassin from that point as well. So it could have been that way too. And then if you made them around the same age, you could then make it that the assassin that was friends with him since childhood was not just also jealous of him becoming the head of the assassins, but also was jealous of his family, and had the mindset of, I hate you so much and I hate the fact that you have a family like you do, that I'm willing to kill them to get to you, That would have been like a really emotionally charged final battle then with the main character and Achilles. The battle in which he would get injured. And obviously Achilles, in my version of the events, would kill the assassin traitor. But he would be so psychologically damaged from losing his wife and son to his best friend for so many years that he wouldn't want anything to do with the assassins anymore, and would have sent the remaining assassins away to other parts of the world. And then, you know, the final scene would be Achilles taking down the portrait of him and his wife and his son. And, you know, all that kind of stuff. Just to reiterate, everything I've said in terms of, like, my idea for Rogue hasn't happened. The game Rogue tells a very different story. But that's just what I would have done differently as a story for that game.
Basta ya! What is your true name, Rogue?
It's, Captain Pissoff.
Rien qu'un pauvre paysan.
Where is the sage? Did you set him free?
I had nothing to do with that. Much as I wish I did.
Take him to the ports. Send him to Sevilla with the treasure fleet.
Oh, wait now! I delivered your treasures, didn't I?
You did, yes. But you robbed us of Duncan Walpole.
So there we go. Edward's pretending to be Duncan has finally come to an end. And they now know that he isn't Duncan. And Edward... And you could sort of like question why Edward would even bother trying to be like, hey, but I did what you wanted, kind of thing, as if that would maybe make them change their minds or something like that. Maybe that's the last shred of, you know, his wanting to make as much money out of the situation as possible, sailing by, and he's just trying to salvage what he can by just being like, hey, I, gave you what you wanted, and then they're like, yes, but you robbed us of Duncan Walpole. So that means that Duncan Walpole was seen as a huge asset by the Templars. And I can understand why. Number one, he has the maps that they want. Number two, he has the glass vial that they need. Number three, he's obviously convinced them that he really does want to join the Templars and that he's willing to kill the mentor of the assassins to actually do so. So there's no reason why the Templars wouldn't see it as a loss to lose Duncan Walpole. And when you think back to Torres, where he was talking to Edward and he said, hopefully this is the first in a long investment or something like that. Obviously Torres wanted Duncan to be a really, strong presence within the Templar order. And so losing Duncan Walpole like that, now that the Templars know that Duncan is actually dead, it's a bit of a loss for them. So that's why they're pissed off, and it's why they're unwilling to let bygones be bygones simply because Edward actually still delivered what they wanted. It was Duncan that they really, really wanted to keep as well as part of that whole thing. And with Duncan gone, it's like, oh, fuck, fuck you. And of course they're not going to be like, oh, well, yeah, you're right, Edward. You did at least give us what we wanted, so we'll let you go this time. That's not going to happen. So there was mention earlier in the story about a treasure fleet that was going to be there. And so this same treasure fleet that was mentioned is the exact one that Edward is going to be sent to. And he's going to meet there another awesome character in the series, Adewale, as well. Zom, the way you see it, Achilles goes from power-hungry to cautious at the last second in Rogue, but then gives up on the world after his injury. Meanwhile, Haytham, having kept his father's ideals, inspired his men to help out their communities in Rogue, and in AC3, he's still a wise and peaceable leader, so either way, Haytham is better than Achilles. Well, the thing about Haytham is that he's been brainwashed since he was 10 years old by the Templars. And so anything that he learned from his father Edward, who was an assassin, by the time Haytham is well and truly an adult, all that training, whatever training Edward gave him, whatever philosophical standing that he gave Haytham, has been completely overridden by the Templar doctrine as well. And so the way that Haytham acts at times can feel like it's noble. If you look at Edward Braddock and what happened between him and Haytham, Haytham expresses to Benjamin Church about certain things, or maybe it's William Johnson he says this to. But anyway, he mentions about the stuff that happened between him and Braddock, and how Braddock was starting to kill innocent people. That might be a noble thing, and it's not a thing where all Templars see innocence as, collateral as kind of like, expendable and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, there would be some Templars that want to actually make sure that innocents aren't killed and all that kind of stuff. But the thing about Achilles is that the only reason he is power hungry in Rogue is because the writers made him that way. And because I don't like what the writers did, I feel that it's a big flaw. And so I will always believe that they could have written that better on Achilles' side. So Achilles, being presented as this power-hungry assassin, is also lazily done as well, because we only see a little bit of that at the start of the game, when Shay is actually confronting Achilles about what happened in Lisbon. And then at the end, we see with Liam how he's, trying to not make a repeat of Lisbon, and all that kind of stuff. And then we see the fight with Achilles and him getting injured and all that kind of stuff. So I would probably feel that it would be more of a thing where Achilles was power hungry if we saw more of him being uncaring. And I don't think that they wrote it well enough for that to even come through necessarily, if they wanted that to be intended with that story as well. And the thing about the Templars is that they are very much like, on the outside, they may seem like they have the world's best interest, like everyone's best interests, but underneath that facade, they want control above all. And as I said, Haytham is brainwashed from a young age by the Templars. And so anything that he talks about through the lens of being a Templar can't 100% be trusted. And he is hypocritical, because if, like he talks about Braddock and the innocents that Braddock was killing, if Haytham was so against that, then he would be on a crusade to make sure that no Templar ever again kills an innocent. If that was how things went down, and we were shown a Haytham who wanted to essentially make a truce with the assassins, and wanted the Templars to follow on from the assassins' lead of, innocents should be spared and they should be kept sacred, then I could see and actually agree that Haytham has the best interests of, civilization at heart. But the thing about Haytham is he is a hypocrite, and it's something that Edward Braddock even mentions to him when he's being chased. And that's the thing about hypocrites, is that they don't want to admit that they are. And so Haytham has this high horseness that he likes to put himself on. And we see a lot of that reflected in Assassin's Creed 3 as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are a bit sloppily done to make the foundation for certain things very, very weak. And so I still believe that the way that they portrayed Achilles in Rogue and explained why he became the way that he did in Assassin's Creed 3 is very lazily done. And that's why it would have been better to do a game story with that game where there's more focus on Achilles. As I said, either make it a story where Achilles and the main character were childhood friends, and the childhood friend who became an assassin as well betrayed him by killing his wife and son, or make it that it was an assassin that he trained from a young age who actually betrayed him by killing his wife and son. Then that would go a long way as to why Achilles would feel as, or would be as messed up as he was over it, and why, from that point of view, the assassins dwindling down in that area would have made a lot more sense as well. But I don't think Haytham necessarily carries his father's ideals, to be honest, really, when you think about it. Like, Edward at the start of this game is not very idealistic, really, and all he's out for is money. But through his losses and through his own mistakes, he comes to realize just how much damage he's done. And the reason why he's done so much damage is not just because of what he's done, but it's also because he actually helped the Templars. And that's one of the reasons why he wants to become an assassin by the end of this story. And we don't see him become one, but in the canon, after the events of this game, he actually does. Because, I mean, even in the after credits scene, he's an assassin in London, you know, all those years later and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think Edward would have been very approving of Haytham becoming a Templar. I think Edward would have been very, very disappointed in his son for taking up the Templar cause. But he can't, because he's dead. He died when Haytham was 10. You know, it's not a situation where Haytham was 21 when his father died, and there was enough time for him to instill a lot of ideals of his. But you have to take into account how old Haytham was when his father was killed. And the Templars took advantage of that, and they manipulated him for years. And that's what the Templars do. They don't want to recruit you through you choosing to decide to apply. They look at who they want to become a Templar. And if they really want you, they will do whatever they can to manipulate you, manipulate your friends, your family, anything they can do to manipulate you into joining them. If they see value in you, is what they will do. They will even kill your parents if that means being able to get you on their side eventually. How would they do that? Well, they could very easily just kill your parents and then pretend that they were there to bring justice for that by arresting the killers and telling you that you don't have to worry, we're going to look after you, we're going to make sure that your parents' killer, even though it was them, we're going to make sure that your parents' killer is going to be brought to justice. You know, so they have their ways. Whereas the assassins are like, it is up to you. Even if we see value in you as an assassin, we are going to completely leave it up to you. You know, if you want to join our cause, great. If you don't want to, that's fine. That's a big difference. So the assassins want to recruit by using free will, as in anyone who becomes an assassin is free to not become one in the first place if they don't want to. It's not something where once they join, they're an assassin for life, and no matter what happens, they have to, you know, if the leadership goes wrong, that they have to actually, you know, follow the leader and be accepting of that. Like, you look at Al-Mualim in Assassin's Creed 1, and the fact that he betrayed the Assassins and the Templars, but mainly because of his betrayal of the Assassins. The fact that he did all that means that it is right that Altair killed him. Whereas, if the leader was simply just making decisions that weren't killing people, but were just poor decisions, if someone didn't agree with them, like Belek in Unity, instead of killing Mirabeau like Belek does, in order to preserve the Assassin Brotherhood, the better way would be to try and get the Assassin leadership to change by other means as well. You know, so there's all these sorts of like situations where Assassin leadership has had to be purged. Sometimes it's done in a way that's actually the good way to do it, like in Assassin's Creed 1, whereas there's also times where it's been done in a bad way, i.e. in Unity as well. So if Haytham was fully brainwashed into seeking control over all else, why would there be issues between the Colonial Templars and the assassin gangs? Because with the gangs being assassins, the fact that they're willing to use chemicals against the public is a big flaw in the writing for Rogue to make the assassins into the bad guys. And so having the assassins be gangs in Rogue and having the Templars want to stop the gangs, it's another example of them lazily making the assassins the villains and making the Templars the heroes by just simply switching around what they do. Templars would actually use poison against civilians as long as they were able to still kill assassins. Assassins wouldn't. You know, they'd try to find other means to actually kill their target instead of using a poison attack or a chemical attack and things like that. So the only reason there are issues between the Colonial Templars and the Assassins gangs is because the Assassins are a threat to the Templars from their perspective. And so obviously, no matter what sort of aspect of society the Assassins are a part of, the Templars would obviously be against those Assassins and all that kind of stuff as well. So anything that the Templars do is in service of the Templars, for the Templars, not in service of the public. They may pretend that it is, and sometimes there are some things that they do that are in benefit for the public, but a lot of the time it's just shadow play and false flag stuff and all that kind of thing that they pull. And that's one of the strengths of the Templars, is they have that power, and they also have the money to back it up with, and all that kind of stuff as well. And so the other thing to remember too is, like, the Assassins aren't all good. Not all the Templars are bad. You know, there's definitely examples of Templars who are actually good for the sake of everyone, regardless of whether they're assassin or just a civilian. But there are also Templars who don't give a flying fuck about any civilians and all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely grey areas like that and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the assassin gangs in Rogue are just basically acting like Templars would, not like Assassins would.
A despicable display. This Tosspot is a ruined man, Caroline. Unfit for life on land, much less at sea. If he goes to the West Indies, it's you who'll suffer.
Father! Father! Come, love. Up with you now.
That old muckworm! He's wrong about me!
I hope it's so.
You believe me, don't you? Can you not see me? Standing out there on the deck of a ship that's sliding into port. And there I am, a man of quality, with 1,000 doubloons spilling from my pockets like drops of rain. I can see it.
I love these moments in this game. I really do feel that, and yeah, it would be difficult with all the action sequences that happen in this game's story, but there are ways to convey a lot of stuff without having to 100% replicate every single aspect, not only from a standpoint of adapting this game's story, but also from a standpoint of having all the ships be 100% realistic and accurate and all that kind of stuff. But I really do feel that this game's story, with the right budget and the right people involved, could be a really, really cool stage production. Like, not a musical with singing, although there would be some singing, obviously, because sea shanties play a big role. But I don't. What I mean is not a musical where every 5 minutes there's a song, but a stage production of this game's story. Because these moments, the way that the audio is mixed and how there's no music, there's just the dialogue and the sound effects, the way all that is presented, it really feels like two actors on a stage doing a scene. And I could really see these, moments being really strong. In front of an audience, a live audience, in real time, being portrayed by really good actors. And the thing about that is that it would be good if they were to do something like that to actually get all the actors back who actually played the characters in this game to be in, if not the stage production for years and years, but at least the first year of production, actually have the actors from the game actually play their characters again. I mean, there's definitely probably some actors that have a lot of stage, experience already who actually play characters in this game as well. But these moments are really, really surreal in a way too, because they are memories that Edward is having. They're kind of a bit dreamlike as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if these are all the dreams that Edward is having of his conversations with Caroline before he actually got embroiled in everything that he is in this game story. And we see another example of Edward really, really longing for a life where he's not only a man of quality, but he's also rich. And the lesson that he learns throughout this game's story and by the end of it is that what was more important between the two aspects, being a man of quality or being rich, and he realizes that being someone of quality is more important than being someone who's rich. And because of those mistakes that he makes and the lessons that he's learned, there's a maturity and an understanding that develops in Edward, which is in stark contrast to how he's actually portrayed here. And you can get, so much out of these moments alone about Edward's character and his goals, his aspirations, and what his life was like, before he became a pirate, and all the things that he's sacrificed. And it's also a good story to examine if you're looking at stories that deal with really strong character arcs through the narrative, and having characters that begin in a certain way and they eventually learn by the end of their story that maybe what they actually were doing is something that caused all this pain and suffering. And so the tragedy with Edward's story overall is that once he does come to the realization of all the mistakes that he's made and actually wants to rectify things and remedy stuff, he can't do that with Caroline because she's dead by the time he even reaches that point. So you can imagine that would be very, very damaging to Edward, knowing that all these years that he spent didn't just cause terrible things to happen to the assassins and other people too. It also meant that he couldn't spend the last remaining years of her life with her, that he was away and doing these sorts of things and all that kind of stuff. And when you look at these moments in this game's story, they've always really, really stood out to me a lot. And this particular one is very sort of like telling about Edward's character, but also he's looking off into the distance. He's dreaming, he's thinking of himself being someone of quality and having riches and all that kind of stuff. So for him, at this point, he's very desperate to get that. But he's being blinded by that, and he's not accepting and seeing what's in front of him, i.e. his wife. From her perspective, she just wants to live with Edward. She just wants to live a married life with him. And for her, what's more important is that there's a roof over their head at all, that there's enough money for them to get, food and drinks and all that kind of stuff. But Edward, of course, wants more than that. He wants that too, which is definitely a good thing. But he wants to go way beyond that. He wants to go into the heights of that kind of stuff. He wants the most extravagant of things. He wants the most money. He wants all this kind of stuff, And in his mind, that's the decent life. And that's what he's pursuing. And Mary Read has a line later that really, really reflects a lot about Edward and his sort of like, his way of doing things, where she says, like he's like, what's gotten into you? And she's like, reality, mate, reality, And Edward, in this point, is definitely not wanting to face up to the reality of his situation. And he still doesn't want to face up to the reality of his situation until he loses all these people that force him to actually take notice. And that's when he starts to realize, oh, fuck. I've been doing all these things in service of myself, and I've been greedy, and I've caused all these problems. And a lot of this stuff wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have been involved, so there'd be a lot of guilt and stuff. And so Edward would want to atone for that. And that's why he comes to realize that, hey, the Templars are not the kind of people that he wants to associate with. He wants to be an assassin, because he sees in the assassin way of things a better way through life than what he had actually been doing and the people that he hurt and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, these moments have always made me think of, imagine this game's story done as a stage production. And as I said, it's a bit difficult because obviously you have ship battles and all that kind of stuff. But there's ways you can do that with lighting and with sets and with, props and all that kind of stuff to create the illusion that there's a big battle going on. You can have like smoke machines, making smoke appear to have, simulation of cannon fire and, sound effects and waves crashing and people yelling and screaming. You can even do like, projections on the back of the wall, whatever you can do. There's so many tricks that you can do with stage production stuff to make something come to life, to make people forget. Because this is the key thing, right? Whether it's a book, whether it's a video game, whether it's a series, whether it's a movie, whether it's a stage production, once the audience is locked in to the story and what's going on, parts of their brain that are more analytical might, and this doesn't happen for everyone, parts of their brain that's a bit more analytical might forget to actually worry about certain stuff and get absorbed in what's going on. So if done right, you could take this game's story and do it as a live action stage production and still draw the audience in, that they forget that they're not actually seeing these events play out as a movie or in some other media. They're just seeing them for what they are, characters in a story, living their lives, going through what they go through. And that's the magic of storytelling, is being able to do that and make people forget that they're actually watching something that's being performed based on a script and not something that they're seeing unveil before their eyes in real life. They get absorbed by the story so much. So I really feel that they could do that with Assassin's Creed Black Flag. It'd be difficult. It'd probably cost a lot of money to do something like that. But I feel that at the very least, these types of scenes would be the easiest probably to actually do, or any other scene where there's characters just talking and having dialogue, not necessarily any action sequences like boarding a ship during a ship battle and stuff like that. So I'm kind of your point in a nutshell. Colonial branches fall into that grey area of not being status quo for either the majority of assassins or Templars. Well, that's the danger of anything, is that people can start out with noble goals and a certain way of doing things in their mind. But how many people, once they get there in the situation, decide to completely go against whatever preconceived plans or ideas they had and end up falling into the trap of just basically falling in line with what goes against with what they intended, Like someone might have intended to make money legally, but they get involved in something which then makes them get caught up in a scam, and then they have to, stick with it, you know what I mean? Just to use as a random example based off of nothing. But yeah, there's definitely grey areas of the Assassins and the Templars conflict as well. But Rogue definitely wasn't the first game in the series to have any content in it that was like that, in terms of analyzing stuff. I mean, you have an assassin in Assassin's Creed 1 who is the head of the assassins, who betrays the assassins and actually was working with the Templars originally, and then was betraying them as well because he, for himself, wanted the power that the Piece of Eden would provide him, And having the head of the assassins be a villain, that's definitely a grey area, to have someone who is in between the two factions and, just out for themselves and wanting things to go their way, regardless of whether or not they outwardly, say that they're an assassin, and all that. But yeah, Rogue definitely wasn't the first game in the series to have any grey area stuff. And Assassin's Creed 3 was the first game to have you play as a Templar. So, Rogue's also not the first time where you get to play as a Templar either. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff. It's hard, as I said. I accept the canon nature of Rogue, but I don't agree with how it was written. And so a lot of my criticisms stem from, if it was written differently, then maybe there'd be things that I could get on board with. But it was very, very sloppy. And they weren't given enough time anyway to flesh it out. It was like, hey, come up with a story. The game comes out this year. Come up with a story. And it has to be finished by the end of the year, because we're releasing the game, you know, like the pressure that would be on writers to get something done like that, versus having 2 or 3 years worth of writing time to actually, you know, develop a story and all that kind of stuff. It's like a fast food version of something, you know what I mean? Like, fast food is fast food for a reason. It's quickly put together. Other food that you get from other places takes time to prepare because they're taking their time with it, you know, so it's going to be a different result. Not to say that, you know, fast food is all bad or anything. I'm just saying that the speed at which fast food is cooked and delivered to the person, or how it's supposed to be anyway. I know things don't always go to plan, but how fast it's supposed to be made and delivered to the customer is in contrast to a meal that gets that takes a lot of time to prepare and then get to the customer. And if you look at writing in that analogy, if you're given a project and they say, here, you have 6 months to write this story, you're not really going to be able to put as much into it as you would be able to if you were given 2 years to write the story. And with Rogue, they weren't given years to write the story. They were given a short period of time to come up with it. It's not the first time that's happened in the series. Like, with Assassin's Creed Revelations, before it was Revelations, when it was the Nintendo DS game, I think it was the Nintendo DS or PlayStation Portable, it might have been, or something. But anyway, when it was that, it was going to be a much smaller game, obviously. But then it was like, hey, you know, we're actually going to turn it into a big title and all that kind of stuff. And so they obviously were given a bit more time. Not as much time as they would get now for a lot of their games and stuff. But with Rogue, yeah, it was just a short amount of time. That's one of the reasons why the UI is just basically black flags, but just change the color scheme. Like, there's no sort of like differences apart from that, really. And a lot of assets can just be reused. And the thing about assets being reused, like, there's a big hubbub about it, as if all assets for every single game must be 100% different in every game. There can't ever be 2 games released by the same company that have any assets at all that are the same. So I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing that they had the same assets from Black Flag and 3 and used it for Rogue. It makes sense given the fact that they wanted the game to come out the same year they started making it. It makes sense that they would make use of all the stuff that's already there to make sure they reach that deadline. Because they wanted to have a story that people who hadn't switched over to the PS4 or they wanted to make sure that fans of the series who weren't ready to jump over to the PS4 or the Xbox One had an Assassin's Creed title that they could buy for the PS3 or the Xbox 360. And so because of that, they obviously wanted to make sure the product got out there as soon as possible, i.e. why the same year the game came out is the same year they started writing the story and actually making the game. But yeah, I feel if they were given more time, maybe they could have fleshed things out a bit more. Or maybe they might have come to a realization and thought, this doesn't actually work as well as we want it to. Oh, well, at least we got 6 more months to work on it. Instead, it's like, oh, well, we have 1 more hour before we have to deliver it. Well, we have to just accept it as it is now. We can't really, change it. And then just send it off. Hey, Godfather, welcome on in. Rodo the Storyline Goddo. Did someone say Remedy? Yes. Entertainment. Welcome on in, Godfather. I hope it's going well. Just pausing this. This is what's cool about doing this type of playthrough where I want to analyze the story and talk about stuff in cutscenes. Is it's so cool on the PlayStation to have the button that when you press it to go into your take a screenshot or save recent gameplay or start new recording screen, etc., that it actually pauses the game. So that's come in handy, so I can pause in cutscenes without having to change the image on screen, so I can talk about stuff, because there might be some things that having the image on screen while I talk about it might make it more prominent, and all that kind of stuff. So that's why the screen's frozen at this time. I'm just doing it so I can talk about stuff when it's happening, as opposed to try and talk about it all once it's all done.
La cena. Cómetela rápido.
You hungry?
Wonder what happens if you don't do anything. No dialogue, I see. That was a great TED Talk, Godfather. Thank you. In main memories, I'm going to try, and I think I forgot to do it in the previous memory, I'm going to try and get as much dialogue from NPCs and enemies as possible.
Now what's your plan, mate?
Find my weapon and steal a ship.
Que Dios nos ayude. No me gusta la pinta de esa tormenta que se acerca.
Parece que se está desviando al oeste, hacia el Golfo. Quizá estemos a salvo.
I like how they didn't take any of Edward's money off him. He's still got all his money I had. I love doing that.
We're stealing a brig. Hey, take what you need.
Won't be a minute.
There's many prisoners held on these ships. Set them free, and they'll sail with us, no question.
So that's the idea, then. Free what men we can, then find a fast ship to flee in.
Aye, there's a brig in this fleet. I'll make my way to it.
Let's watch Adewale as he swims all the way over there. just to reiterate as well, the music turned off is on purpose. For this story-focused playthrough, I wanted to make sure that the dialogue was the main focus instead of any music or sound effects. So the sound effects have been turned down a little bit, lower than what I normally have them. I've kept the dialogue audio to the fullest, and I've turned the music off completely. So it's been interesting playing this game so far without the music, because I was saying earlier with that flashback scene to when Edward was talking to his wife, how it really felt like a stage production, and how that sort of feel and all that kind of stuff adds a certain, well, feeling to things like that. And so having no music in those moments and having no music in these other moments adds in some ways a kind of realism, because obviously the only time one hears music is when it's being created. If we're listening to music that we are listening to because we've, turned on the music and listening to it, or if someone nearby is and all that kind of stuff. But if you're not listening to music, you're just hearing the sounds of the ambience around you, or you're hearing the sounds that you're making, things like that. So it kind of gives that feel a bit without having the music playing constantly.
There's a catch to this favor. You're sailing with me.
I'd follow you to hell for this, mate.
Hey there, Stan. You never paid attention to Ade in this mission. Does he always jump like that? I've never actually watched him jump off the side of the ship in this part before, because usually I'm already starting to kill the enemies or move forward and don't actually watch him as he jumps off.
Oro, plata, jade, tabaco, lo que se te ocurra.
¿Y agua qué? ¿O comida? Me preocupa más mi estómago que las arcas del rey.
So in every playthrough we notice something new. That's it, that's the funny thing with a lot of games too, is because if you get into a pattern that you always follow whenever you play a game, it might not be until you decide to do a different approach that you start to notice new things. Like I remember with Deus Ex Human Revolution, I got into a pattern of what paths I would take, and then one time I was like, you know what, let's actually explore the levels a bit more. And then I found some pathways that I didn't even know about, because I never thought to do a thorough examination of the location.
Come on, lads. If we're to drown today, it won't be here.
The other thing is too, Stan, like there's some games where you're just so used to playing it and what you're presented with visually that sometimes it's not until you're in a state of mind where you're like, let's have a look at the screen, and then you go, oh shit, I never noticed that the color of that object was that color. You know what I mean? You've seen the scene so many times that there's stuff that just goes by the wayside that you don't notice until you're in a mindset to just look around at different things. Stan, yeah, like the back of the ship. Yeah, like this ship, for example. You know, how many people would actually stop and examine it and look at the different texturing on it, the different patterns, the coloring, you know, the way this is moving, like the rope, like there's just so much stuff, you know, the water, the sky, like how many people would pay attention to that in a sense of being actively aware of it? Come on, it's not that bad. They do stand, yeah. The colours really do look good. One of the things I've always loved about this game is, with the graphics department, is I've always loved how crisp the graphics are, but also how vibrant the colours can be. And I've said this a few times on streams of Black Flag in the past now, that I still feel that this game's graphics are superior to Assassin's Creed 3's remastered by a long shot. And when you look at the original Assassin's Creed 3 versus this game, there was even a big leap between this game and AC3 in that department. So if a remaster of a 2012 game still doesn't look as good as the original version of a 2013 game in the same series, but that's just me. Maybe to some others, the remastered AC3 graphics look better than the Black Flag graphics, but I truly feel that at this stage, until it's been 20 years since this game came out, we don't need a remake of Black Flag. And there still seems to be some confusion by what a remake is versus a remaster. For some, they treat it as if it's the same thing, when it's actually not. Let's use an analogy like, if someone gave you a cup, and they said, hey, here's this cup. And then you were to go, I don't like that this cup has scratches on it. I know what I'm going to do. Instead of just getting a new cup that's made from scratch, I'm going to just fix this cup up. I'm going to get some paint, and I'm going to paint it and make it look better again. That's a remaster. A remake would be, using the cup analogy, this cup has cracks in it. I'm just going to create a new mug, a new cup from the ground up that looks the same as this, but I'm going to add an extra handle. I'm going to add an image on it. I'm going to add this. I'm going to add that. And then by the end of it, it has some aspects of the original cup, but it's a completely different thing in other aspects. You know, that's a remake. So yeah, a remaster is not a remake. A remake is not a remaster. And remasters are not taking something and completely redoing it from the beginning and then adding extra stuff. A remaster is simply taking what's already there and trying to amplify it by improving things that might have been issues in the original release. Yeah, Stan, repainted. Exactly. But yeah. But no, I don't think this game needs a remake for quite a long time. A remaster, maybe in like a couple of years' time from now, but I don't think a remake is needed.
There's a brig nearby just waiting for us to take her.
Alright, I guess Edward can't grab onto that part of the mast that I was trying to grab onto. The only reason I did that is because I wanted to get close to the enemies without potentially being detected, just in case there was any dialogue that the enemies on this ship have. Like the other enemies on other ships have had dialogue. Get over here, now. I command you. What are you doing? Hurry up. Good. You won't be back. We won't be back. Alright, so no dialogue from them on that ship. Hey there, Star. Were you able to get up, or is your cat still being like, no, this is where you sit for now? Stan, was that Arnie playing Scorpion Mortal Kombat? Get over here. Get down here. Come here. I mean, if you take a soundbite from Arnie's movie The Running Man, in The Running Man, one of the people, one of the stalkers or one of the gladiators, whatever you want to call them, that the contestants have to survive against, one of them is called Sub-Zero. So if you want a soundbite of Arnie saying Sub-Zero, you can take it from that movie and then apply it to Mortal Kombat and have, like, when you select Sub-Zero, have Arnie go, Sub-Zero. There's actually a line where he's like, Sub-Zero, now, plane hero, because he gets killed. But yeah. Although we did get the Terminator in Mortal Kombat, however, it's voiced by someone else, not Arnie. Which is a shame. Would have been good if it was voiced by Arnie. So you got to get up after an hour and a half. Oh, that's good then. It's good that your cat was like, okay, human, I allow you to get up now.
Voy a ir a lo más alto. Esto es una locura.
Cálmate, no pasará nada. En unos minutos partiremos.
¡Tú! ¡Alto! ¡Tú! ¡Vuelve aquí ya! ¡Cobarde! ¡Vuelve aquí!
In the previous phase to this one, for those who didn't catch it, I did a showcase, and what that meant was, as I went through the game, I would actually show off the environments and stop the camera on certain angles and really have a thorough inspection of certain things. And if anyone who hasn't played the game before or has but hasn't done that kind of thing yet, there's definitely a lot of cool things that you might notice. And I talked over the dialogue, so we need to reload the checkpoint.
¡Rápido! ¡Parad al canalla! Voy a ir a lo más alto. Esto es una locura.
Cálmate.
We heard that dialogue before.
¡Alto! ¡Tú! ¡Para! Esa rata está huyendo. Intenta escapar.
¡Deja de retorcerte, pirata! ¿Me entiendes? ¡No te muevas!
We're going topside. Be ready.
Apparently, in real life, there was a massive treasure fleet that was destroyed and lost. But where this game differs, of course, is to say that there was actually a ship that survived, and that ship is, of course, the one that Edward names the Jackdaw. Either that or I'm getting it wrong, and there was a ship that did get out of the fleet, but it wasn't found afterwards or something.
¡Debemos levar anclas! ¡Vamos! ¡Rápido, por el amor de Dios, moveos! ¡Que Dios nos ampare! ¡Nos hará pedazos! ¡No vamos a ir a ninguna parte! ¡Quedaos quietos y preparaos para lo peor! ¿Está claro? ¿Quién está al mando aquí? ¡Alto! Tú! ¡Alto! Ahora estás acabado.
Stan, yeah, you watched a video of Piracy Historian talking about it. An entire treasure fleet sank in Florida coast during a storm, and it said that one ship escaped it. Ah, so there we go. So there was a ship that escaped. And so in this game, they make it out that the ship that escaped is actually the one that Edward takes and calls the Jackdaw. Cool. Was that a fairly recent one too? Because I might have been thinking about the one that I also saw recently too. It was like an expert reacts to Black Flag, and they talked about all the different things, and they're really cool too, because while they did point out stuff that wasn't actual realism in that respect, they didn't come from a point of view of, oh, that's not realistic. They were just like, yeah, you know, this is what it would be like in real life, and in this game they decided to do this, you know, instead, that kind of thing.
Lay aboard, lads!
Save your singing for Davy Jones, you jagabats! It's a hard wind coming!
The man speaks true. You lot weigh anchor. As for the rest, half on the foremast and half at the main. Let's outrun this hurricane! Keep watch on those galleons. See they don't give us trouble.
They won't. Far too slow for this weather.
Incoming
Fire! They're on the bowline to hell!
Bark any orders you think wise, mate. We're up against it here.
These men know their place. They'll see us home.
Ah!
Concentrate on the task at hand, sir!
Fetch young Tom, hurry!
Look out, man!
I see it.
Enemy's firing!
You will founder the ship, can we? Water spout! Steer clear of that thing!
Feel that? The trim may be off. Has it split the dead eye round?
Water spout, man! Steer wide!
It's not looking good.
Steady as she goes, man!
Where did he store those ancient?
Keep it clear. You hear the news?
Massive swell rolling in starboard!
Oh, Godfrey Elijah, we made it.
What a mess, Jesus!
Oh, by God, we pulled this one straight from the teeth of Neptune. I'm Edward. Much thanks for your aid back there.
Adewale.
Ever been to Nassau, Adewale?
Not yet.
By God, she took some knocks, didn't she? I think I'll keep her. All hands aft, lads! We're taking this one home!
Yo ho! Hoist the colors! Now! Put the cookie down and do it! I thought I'd add that extra bit, Zereth. Thank you for redeeming that Arnie impression. Stan, I'm not sure. You watched it quite a while back and you can't even remember the video. That's fair enough. Yeah, I think I might remember. I think I might know what video it was. In fact, my notepad that I kept for the showcase run, I've still got a link to the pirate video, I think. Or hang on, was it for this story focus? Oh no, that was the Darby McDevitt audio commentary. Anyway. Let's go to YouTube and I'll get the link. Here we go. Pirate Expert reacts to Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. It was a video on GameSpot. Their YouTube. It really does, Stan. Yeah. It's funny, because with all the storms and stuff that were going on in that mission there, it's surprising how it didn't feel as loud as you would think it would without the music, you know what I mean? So I was expecting especially the water spouts to make more noise. I thought it'd be have more oomph than that. But yeah, when you don't play the music, and you've played this game multiple times and you're so used to the music, it's definitely weird to not hear the music. And so it's going to be weird later on when Blackbeard dies and not have the music. But yeah, for this one playthrough, I'm willing to have the music turned off. So there we have it, the treasure fleet. The ship survives, the crew survives, Edward and Adewale survive, and Edward is already showing how welcoming he is of Adewale by asking him if he's ever been to Nassau. And I like how Adewale responds with, "Not yet," which is really cool, because the way that he responds is in such a way to say that I'm willing and I want to still be on this crew. I want to, so if you're going to go to Nassau, I haven't been there yet. So it's a more kind of like positive outlook on it, instead of going, oh, I don't know, I haven't been there, but I don't know if I want to go there, kind of thing. Adewale's like, not yet. And speaking of Adewale, Tristan D'Lala is who plays Adewale. They're his other Assassin's Creed roles in the series. And I'll also bring up his IMDb as well, and provide a link to that in chat. Not only is he credited on IMDb for acting, but also being part of crew, but also visual effects for stuff as well. And there's a link to his IMDb.
I've made my choice, Addy. I'm calling her the Jackdaw. A sly bird I loved as a child back in Swansea.
A dark little creature, no?
Did it rub you wrong when I took this brig as mine own?
It was the sort of rub I have learned to endure, sailing among faces of such fairness.
It's true. Most of these men wouldn't accept you as a captain. So what fair role would complement such unfairness?
I'll be your quartermaster. Nothing less.
All right. And as quartermaster, have you any immediate counsel for this Tyro captain?
Rest and repast would do us good before Nassau. Water for drinking. Hunting for food and repairs.
Well reasoned, sir. Hunting, it shall be. We'll find a decent place to drop anchor.
This will be a good point to talk about some stuff there too, but also read some database entries that I need to catch up on. That conversation is, of course, talking to the fact that because Adewale is a black man, that the other crew members, if Edward was to say, hey, Adewale is your new captain, that most of the crew would be against Adewale being captain. And obviously, it would be good if Edward, despite that, was to be like, hey, you know, you have as much right to be captain of this ship as I do, you know. But that's not how it's played. That's not how it goes down. But the conversation being had and the talk about, you know, such fairness, obviously being about skin color there too. But Edward is still compromising because he's, as I said, he's not saying, you know, Adewale, you have as much right to be captain of this ship as I do. So let's put it to a crew vote, you know, over which one would be captain. And hey, maybe they would have voted for Adewale to be to be the captain. But as it stands, because there would have been people that would have been like, oh, we're not going to, and all that, that's how things go down. And Edward, in knowing that they wouldn't accept him as captain, as Adewale as captain, he's like, well, what would be something that we could compromise on that you would be happy with, that would honor you and what you want. And so Adewale is confident enough, and rightfully so, has as much you know, stake to choose who he wants to be on the crew, you know, as much as Edward does. He basically says, well, I'll be your quartermaster, nothing less. And I like that dialogue there because Adewale is showing that he's not a pushover, that he is very much confident enough to say that. You know, he's not afraid to say it. He's not keeping silent. You know, he's basically saying, look, you know, if this is the situation, if they're not going to accept me as captain, then I'm going to be the one here to put a stipulation and say, hey, you know, I'm going to be a quartermaster, nothing less. And so Edward agrees. He's like, that's great. You know, what would you suggest as quartermaster we do now? You know, so I like how Edward is able to do that. Obviously, it would have been good if he was like, hey, you know, let's vote on who is going to be captain, or, you know, do you want to be captain or something like that? I guess at the very least, though, it is good that Edward is welcoming of Adewale, and despite all the other aspects going on in that time period and all that kind of stuff, Edward is still wanting Adewale to feel valued, not because he just wants him to feel valued and still have Edward, and like Edward's pretending that he doesn't, you know, like Adewale or anything like that. He's purely wanting, you know, to find out from Adewale, you know, well, if you're not going to be captain, if they wouldn't accept you as captain, what is a role that you would like to have? And Adewale choosing quartermaster is cool because he's a great quartermaster, and in Freedom Cry he becomes a captain of his own ship, of course, and rightfully so too, and all that kind of stuff. And so Adewale gets that reception. And in the story, there's no crew members on the Jackdaw that say anything about him behind his back. There's no, racist remarks about him or anything like that. So from that perspective, it would seem that the crew is fine with Adewale. I mean, Adewale even captains the Jackdaw later in the story when Edward is mixed up with Bartholomew Roberts, and Adewale captains the ship so that they can, survive and get out of there. So they would have had to be accepting of that. Otherwise, they would have done a mutiny and tried to overthrow Adewale. So Adewale definitely has the respect of the crew. So it would have been interesting if they went there and actually had the crew and Adewale and Edward actually have a discussion and say, hey, Adewale has as much right to be captain of this ship as I am. What say you, crew? And that could have been a good way to explore how the crew felt about that. But we don't get that aspect, though. We just get the aspect of Edward wanting to make sure that Adewale still feels valued and giving him agency to be like, hey, what role for you would you say is the role that you are going to be like, yep, this is what I want. And instead of Adewale backing down and saying, well, if the crew's not going to be accepting me as captain, I guess I just have to be, scrubbing the decks or something. He's strong-minded and strong-willed and confident enough to be like, no. Quartermaster. I'll be quartermaster, nothing less. That's what I'm saying. I'm not, leaving it open for discussion or anything like that. That's what I'm wanting to do. And Edward is, of course, no worries at all. Quartermaster it is, kind of thing. And Adewale is such a great character that I really like Freedom Cry DLC. I'll be doing that as part of this playthrough as well, playing through Freedom Cry, and giving it the same kind of focus on story and character that I have so far with the main game, and will continue to do as well. Juxtaposing the reception of Adewale later on, and we'll see it eventually soon, but I just want to mention it now because it is relevant to the current thing that I'm talking about. When Adewale is introduced to Blackbeard and introduced to Benjamin Hornigold, out of the two characters, Benjamin Hornigold and Blackbeard, Benjamin is the only one who basically is showing racism towards Adewale by saying, you let him captain the ship, did you? Or you let him have a pistol, did you? Which is Benjamin Hornigold's way of not directly saying what he wants to say, but just trying to skirt around it, but still being racist by the suggestion, and suggesting that, Adewale shouldn't be trusted because of his skin color, So Benjamin Hornigold is, in some ways, foreshadowing the fact that he's definitely not against or not above being racist towards Adewale and other black men and women as well. Whereas Blackbeard is just welcoming. He's just, like he just reacts to Adewale very differently than Benjamin Hornigold. And I like those little subtle things in this game. So I'll definitely cover that again when we get to that cutscene. But I just wanted to mention that too, because I think it's, relevant to the current cutscene that we saw talking about Adewale and, the race and all that kind of stuff. That is a topic in that moment as well. But yeah, I definitely would recommend people play Freedom Cry if you haven't already, because it's definitely a really, really good DLC. I would probably say it's one of the best in the series, to be honest. And it's just a shame that we never got a fully fledged Adewale game when he's an assassin. And that's another reason why I hate Rogue for killing him off, because I'm just like, ugh. But there's still room to do a game with Adewale in between the end of Freedom Cry DLC and before we see him in Rogue. So I don't think that the character cannot get a game now because he got killed off later. But it is a shame that he got killed off in that way. I thought it was, it pissed me off. I was like, fuck you, killing Adewale off like that. Speaking of Adewale, there should be a database entry that has come up now. I just want to get the exclamation marks for those off. Adewale, born 1692 in Trinidad, died not yet. Born to enslaved Ogoni parents in Yoruba, Adewale was sold to the owner of a prosperous plantation before his teens. He remained on this plantation, working the fields until his mid-teens, always scheming of ways to escape his predicament, but uneasy with the prospect of living life as a fugitive. Then fortune struck, giving Adewale the sign he needed. At some point, near his 16th birthday, a group of buccaneers raided the plantation, robbing it of raw cane, refined sugar, and as many reals as they could find. Seeing in this an opportunity, Addy grabbed a crate of sugar and hauled it aboard one of the longboats the buccaneers had rowed ashore. Surprised to see a slave among them, the buccaneers were nevertheless thankful for the aid and welcomed Adewale among them. Ade sailed with his first group of men for many years, quickly learning the ways of a seaman, grateful for the chance to develop his own skills and chase his own passions. And though his life among buccaneers was not free of the usual bigotry of the era, Ade found the prejudice to be more confrontational than restrictive. In 1715, misfortune struck a cruel blow when the ship Ade was aboard struck a shallow sandbar near the port of Havana. The buccaneers, mostly British at the time, tried desperately to free the trapped vessel, but after catching sight of an approaching Spanish galleon, abandoned ship only to be torn apart by schools of circling bull sharks. Ade made peace with his fate and stood his ground. Taken to Havana for questioning and inspection, Spanish authorities eventually decided to send Adewale to Spain, where they felt he would make an excellent interpreter, owing to his fluent command of Spanish, English, and French. Some weeks later, they loaded him into one of the galleons that made up their perennial treasure convoy en route to Seville. A character that we met previously was the Sage. Abstergo's archives contain a few references to men called the Sage, or a Sage, but they are few and far between. Each sighting seems to refer to a different person living in a vastly different time and location. The earliest example was found on a Sumerian clay tablet in cuneiform script, while the latest survives only as a footnote in one of Laureano Torres's own journals, dated January 1704. In all, according to Abstergo's existing research, 7 different sages seem to have graced the world stage in the past 1,200 years, but the real number is likely higher. Perhaps the strangest aspect connecting each of these various sightings is the fact that, in every case, visual descriptions of each sage are remarkably similar. So similar, in fact, that one wouldn't be faulted for assuming they were talking about a single, immortal man. However, in 2 of the 7 citations, explicit mention is made of their death and burial. Are we therefore dealing with some bizarre form of reincarnation, or some simpler explanation that eludes us at present? More research is required. I was talking about the Sage earlier when he appeared in the story, and talking about how he is Aita reborn, who was a Isu who was married to Juno, another Isu that we have met in the series before this game. And there was a big catastrophe that was going to destroy the world. And the Isu were trying to find ways to either prevent it from happening, or if they couldn't, find new ways to survive after it. And one of the ways that they tried, that Juno was experimenting with, was the ability to basically allow themselves to be reborn centuries later, so that they could survive the catastrophe. And Aita is the one that inhabits the body of the sages throughout history. And there's been quite a few, as I mentioned in this database entry. In the games after this, they also have a few other sages that we get to meet. This is talking about something that happens in a comic book, but Juno gets killed for good in the comics. Once she has been given a new physical body, she actually gets killed by Desmond's son. And Desmond's son was someone that he didn't know about before he died. He didn't know that he was actually a father. And Desmond's son also gets reborn as a sage. And so I find it ironic and very, very poetic that Juno would end up getting killed by someone who is her husband reborn. After all those years of wanting to get a new body to inhabit and then also hopefully have her husband by her side, ironically, she ends up getting killed by someone who is actually her husband reborn as a human. So I thought that was quite poetic. However, though, the fact that they killed Juno off in a comic book has not sat well with me ever since I found out. I played through Black Flag and played through Unity and then played through Syndicate, in which she also appears. And then I played Origins, and throughout Origins I was like, okay, when are we going to see Juno? You never do. And I was like, okay, maybe in the next game. Odyssey comes along. We do see her in Odyssey, but we see her in a different time period than what we see her in the other games. So she did eventually make another game appearance, but she appeared in a game that was showing an event that happened in the past, not something that happened after the events of Assassin's Creed Origins. So I don't really count that in that respect. It was in one of the DLCs for Odyssey. But it wasn't until I decided to actually read up about Juno that I found out that she was killed off in a comic book. Because I don't read the comics. And so, knowing that, I was like, great. Juno first appeared in Brotherhood. By the end of Assassin's Creed 3, it was certainly revealed that she was a villain. And then, in all the other games leading up to when they wrote the comic book story where she gets killed, I had just assumed that they were continuing to build up like the Avengers movie did with Thanos. I was expecting that kind of approach to Juno, but they just killed her off in a comic book. And I feel that very, very unsatisfying, because the thing about the comic books is that I'm not against them having comic books. Like, I'm not a fan of comic books, but not to the extent of hating them as a thing. Like, I think they're a really cool medium. And I'm glad that they're a medium that has kept on going and hasn't fallen by the wayside or anything like that. Personally, though, I'm not a big fan of comics, so I don't read the comics for Assassin's Creed, let alone other franchises in general. Like, I'm a Resident Evil fan, never read a Resident Evil comic if there are any. I'm a Tomb Raider fan, never read a Tomb Raider comic. But having a character that you build up in the games to be a major villain and then just killing them off in a comic book, that's very anticlimactic, because it would have been good to actually play as a present-day character who ends up killing Juno to finish off her story that way. But it was finished off in a comic book. If it was a minor character that you only saw in one game and they decided to flesh out that character's story a bit more, then that's fine to do that in a comic book. But if you're taking a character that was primarily and strongly focused in the games and building them up to be someone that the players were expecting to confront, but then you kill them off in a different medium, it's just basically ruining what could have been a great cinematic video game moment in the series, especially if you'd been following it and you were wanting to, see Juno be defeated. But that gets done in the comic book. Getting back to this game, though, and the Sage, Aita is reborn as Bartholomew Roberts. What's interesting, they mention about how he looks the same throughout history. They have played with that a little bit, because Germain in Assassin's Creed Unity, he's a Sage as well, but he doesn't look anything like Bartholomew Roberts. Could he have styled himself to look that way? Sure, of course. Like anything, people aren't born with a mustache. So, at any point, Bartholomew Roberts could have shaved his mustache off if he wanted to. He didn't have to keep it the same. In this game, in the present day, you also have a Sage, John Standish, as well. And he's got a mustache and everything. But they've used the same character model's face as they have for Bartholomew Roberts for his character as well. Whereas in the other games after this game, they don't all use the same character model of the Sage that we've seen in Black Flag or throughout the other games. They do make changes here and there as well. But the one constant thing that always stays the same is that he has 2 different colored eyes. And that's something that was established in this game and has been kept for all the other times that a sage has actually appeared in the series as well. And this idea, this concept of the ones who came before wanting to be reborn in a future time period after the catastrophe has happened gets carried on in Valhalla, but it's a different kind of thing where it's not a multiple thing that can happen. It's a one-time thing. So in that game, they can only be reborn once. Because it's a different method. They're doing a different kind of recipe, so if you will, to get a similar result, but not exactly 100% the same. But in any case, the Sage of Aita gets to be reborn multiple times. And sometimes he's born, in 2 different people in the same time period or close together. There's actually some letters that you find in bottles throughout the game, and it's actually the diary of a previous Sage, but he was alive when Torres was alive. So I don't exactly know the timing of the years between when that Sage died and when this Sage was born. But I think this Sage was born when the other one was still alive. So I think it can happen that way too. It doesn't have to be, it's only once in a generation or something. It can actually be a situation where you have 2 Sages, I think, can exist in the same time period. Let's see, so I read Adewale. I just need to update my document. And we've read the Sage. So there's been an update to Edward Kenway's database entry, but I can't remember now where I read up to when there was only a certain amount of information on him. I'll see if I can remember looking at the text itself. Yeah, so I read about worst habits: drinking, fighting, idleness. Caroline discouraged these fanciful ideas. Yep. This note, already read it. Yes, already read that part. Already read that part. Already read that part. And that part too. Okay, I don't know why this was updated, as in why they put an exclamation mark next to Edward's database entry, because there's no new information different to what I read the first time. But just in case there is later, I need to update my note on having looked at his database entry and just add what the last bit of text is. Alright, so they're the database entries that I wanted to cover.
Spied a few items in the hold earlier. Powder and a few pistols. I think I'll fashion a second holster if I can.
It's a good start.
One you find laughable.
Could we talk a moment about the condition of the ship?
What's the trouble?
I had a walk about the gun deck this morning and couldn't stand for what I saw. A clutter of linstocks heaped like tinder, and one with a slow match still burning.
Christ.
And just nearby, 2 barrels of gunpowder, closer than man and wife, fit to explode at the touch of a spark.
We'll stow ours good and proper.
As for the cannons, they might as well be tossed. Clogged touch holes in need of scraping, corrosion on the bodies, barrel swabs as naked as knives, and breech ropes so rotted, I could use them for knitting yarn. The short of it is, we need good equipment kept in fine condition. For we cannot win every battle with snares and shouts. So worry about your own armaments when it suits you. But don't forget about your jackdaw as well.
No, indeed. We'll make it a point to keep this ship and its crew in fine condition.
Let out some sail!
Let's...
Whoop. All right. We've completed sequence 1 and 2. We're in sequence 3 now. To recap the previous sequence, I don't think I can see that yet. Yeah. Anyway, sequence 3, memory 1, this Tyro captain. For his first order as quartermaster, Adewale suggests that Edward do a little hunting to fix himself up. That dialogue is really cool too. I like the way that things are written in this game. And Darby McDevitt recently, who was the lead writer on this game, he did a audio commentary of certain parts of this game's story recently, and I'll put a link to that in the chat in a moment for those who might have actually missed it. And he talks a little bit about the style of how things were written, and that's why you have a lot of words with capitalizations that you wouldn't normally nowadays put a capital letter for as well. So if you notice, if you look at the dialogue, the next time there's any dialogue being spoken, if you look at the subtitles, you can see that certain words have an uppercase capital letter when they don't necessarily need to. I think he also talks about the fact that the style of writing that you see in the game is basically as easy to generally understand than what the much earlier kind of like vernacular and everything was as well. I think he showed it to someone who is very knowledgeable about the different writing of the period, and was told that the version of writing and the kind of words that were used is more so later in the century than earlier, and that maybe it'd be better to do the earlier version. But Darby was kind of like, well, the earlier version, or the earlier, in the century is kind of like a bit, I can't remember his exact words that he said, but essentially they were very, very strong to the point where it'd be like, if anyone who doesn't know how to read Shakespeare has ever read Shakespeare and looked at the writing and gone, this is so dense, I can't even friggin' understand what this is. Apparently, much earlier in the 1700s, I think it was, the way that things were written to our eyes is way more complex to understand than what it was later in the century. So they erred on the side of caution, or they went with later in the century. And that's why the writing in this game, in terms of like the text that you see and capitalizations and all that kind of stuff, and the wording, and I can't actually bring up the sequence recap because that actually has some words in it that are done in a very certain style of that time period as well. Now to put a link to that video in chat as well. It was a couple of weeks ago that this video was released.
Loose all, let's move!
Loose all! Hearty like!
Hey, Mr. Gote. How's it going?
Haul in the stunsails! As much sail as you can!
We ride the wind for all she's worth.
Larboard! Cast away! Think he's alive, sir?
We want to go over the sheet anchor's hawse given time. Mate won't take to your humbugging.
We're headed straight.
Close up! Ease her sticks!
Ease the spanker. Hold down.
Trim us off the wind!
Bring in all sail. Gammon tight.
Captain's overboard!
Mr. Gote, good. You enjoying your weekend, grinding games and getting achievements? You're talking to mates in Discord earlier and they're happy to see you home still. Well, that's really good, dude. It's always good to have that support and to know that you've got people that are thinking of you, and it's really good that you're able to be at home. Glad that you're enjoying your weekend too, as well. Not yet, Mr. Gote, no. I've seen Crooked play it a lot, and it definitely looks like a game that I really want to play even more than I did before. When the game first came out and it had all those issues with it, it was disappointing to hear, but at the same time, I didn't actually follow the project from when it was first announced up until that point, so I didn't have as much of an attachment to the game before it came out than others might have had. So after all that happened with the release, I was still interested in it and decided to wait until later to actually play it, until all the issues had been sorted out, because I knew that I'd be getting the console version anyway. And hopefully they've fixed the majority of the issues by now. But the game has apparently been reappraised, it would seem, and the consensus is a bit more positive, maybe. But yeah, from what I've seen being played and the style of game and everything like that, like the setting is definitely something I'm interested in. I really like that kind of setting. And the closer we get to reality to that setting is kind of like exciting a bit. Because there's a lot of things that, you know, decades ago were only theorized to be the way things would end up, you know, and some of those things have actually become reality. But maybe not 100% the same way that it was envisioned decades before, but there's definitely things that we take advantage of now that we didn't have 20 or 30 years ago. So as time gets more towards like the 2030s and then eventually the 2040s and then the 2050s, it'll be interesting to see how closely certain things end up being as they've been. Like, our prediction for how things will end up looking like in a certain amount of decades from now has probably improved quite a lot. Mr. Gote, you finished it and you've been watching Crooked enjoy it too. Oh, that's good. That's good that you finished it. Yeah, I definitely want to play it. I know some things about it, obviously, having seen some of the game being played, but I don't know every single little detail about the story, so it'll still be fresh for me. But yeah, I do have plans to play that game, but it'll definitely be next year when I do a playthrough of it. Next year, I want to be able to get quite a lot of games done that aren't my regular games. Mass Effect 2 and 3, still need to get through those. Ghost of Tsushima, still want to play that. Before I do the new Spider-Man games, I want to do the Spider-Man games as well that I grew up with and played as the years went on as like a marathon thing before getting to the new ones, because I want to do that for nostalgia as well, to cover like even going so far back as when I was a child and rented the NES Spider-Man game, Spider-Man and the Sinister Six. I even want to do a stream of that, as well as other Spider-Man games that have come out in the years since then. Not every single one in existence, because there will be some Spider-Man games I never played, but there's quite a few that I want to revisit in a marathon-style playthrough before getting to the new Spider-Man games. One of the reasons is because he is still my favorite Marvel character, I would have to say. So, very much looking forward to playing those Spider-Man games, of course, but want to do it as a marathon. Oops, I forgot. Need to go in and craft this. Pistol holster 2. When doing a no upgrades challenge, these are the only upgrades for Edward that the game forces you to actually put. Pistol and health. Hang on. Need to see if the secret is just a message in a bottle. If it is, I'll grab that, because I want to cover the sage letters that you find as well. Mr. Gote, you want to get those Spider-Man games, but you like your Xbox too much? That's fair enough, dude. Yeah. Yeah, the rights that were secured have most likely definitely been probably lifetime rights. You never know. But maybe not that far ahead, but probably quite a few years into the future they still have the rights to be the primary rights holder for video games based on Spider-Man, maybe. I'll be reading these letters, though, once we get them all. And I'll get the treasure map just for my own sake, in case there's something that I want to get off-stream. There will be some off-stream stuff that I want to do, i.e. getting enough money and resources together to upgrade the ship enough to be adequate to not have to worry about on-stream doing any grinding for it. Or making the grinding I do for it on-stream as minimal as possible.
Ahoy, Captain. Find what you need.
My needs and wants are oceans apart, mate. But I did fashion myself a new holster. All I need now is a pistol to lie in it.
Yeah. Taken from the holds, just as you said.
Little more than a blowpipe. But it'll do. So, are we rested? Or should we idle a while longer?
Best way anchor. I think the crew is itching to reach civilization.
You'll find no civilization in Nassau. But it's a fine place to be merry all the same.
You see a little bit of ungratefulness on Edward's side of things, because he looks at the pistol and he's like, no more than a blowpipe, but it'll do, kind of thing. But I don't think he means it as a slight against Adewale's skills in identifying a good weapon or not. It's just that Adewale has found this weapon, and Edward's saying that he needs a pistol. Adewale is like, hey, here's one. But Edward's like, to the pistol, because that's his, that's what he's criticizing. He's criticizing the pistol. He's like, it's no more than a blowpipe, but it'll do.
Give me some speed!
Now we're actually outside of the memory. Just want to get these exclamation marks off. What I want to do is jump out into present day, because we have gone into present day automatically once. We haven't reached the point yet in the story where we'll be pulled out automatically again, but after each sequence, regardless, I still want to exit the Animus, just in case there's any new NPC dialogue that actually happens, or any other things that we can hear that we don't normally hear unless you either get out of the Animus before the next point where you automatically get taken out. Because sometimes in these games, for example in Brotherhood, you can go through that game without exiting out of the Animus when you want to for the whole game. The game will take you out of it, obviously, when it wants you to. But when you want to just stay in the Animus and you have a choice, you can choose not to. However, if you actually exit the Animus after every sequence of the main story, and you talk to Sean, Rebecca, and Lucy, you can actually get new dialogue that you didn't get before. However, the variables of how long that new dialogue actually remains available versus when it actually became available is a bit unknown in that respect. So in this game, for example, I don't know how often there will be different NPC dialogue in present day. For all I know, there could be new dialogue after sequence 2 has been finished in present day, or there might not be. The only way to find out is to actually exit the Animus and listen out. I've actually kept a note of all the NPC dialogue in present day that I've heard so far. Not word for word all the time, but sometimes word for word, but other times just the basic gist. So that, for example, I've already heard someone talk about how... what's an example? Someone says coffee was better in the old building. So I've made note of that. So if I'm listening for dialogue and I hear that, I can look at my list and see, right, I can hear that dialogue. Oh, I've already covered it. So I know. And I can also tell if I haven't covered any dialogue. So let's exit the Animus and see if there's any new dialogue that gets said by any employees.
The first time I did this for more than an hour. I had similar kinds of effects from the Animus. Just, if it happens again, have a word with Melanie and see if it needs checking out.
The other.
The elevators don't scare me.
Feels like a high-tech company, finally.
Yeah, so that dialogue we first heard, and the dialogue we just heard there.
In the old building.
What are the chances that I mention that dialogue as an example of one I've already recorded, and then it doesn't take long to hear it again? But yeah, so those dialogues are the same. You can actually, and I don't know if they're still in that location, but it's muffled. You can make out some of the words, but there's a conversation that Melanie and Olivier are having that you can hear, but not make out every single word. So let's see if they're still there. Okay, so from the point where we had to get out of the Animus because the game took us out of it, to finishing sequence 2 and now, they've actually moved where Melanie and Olivier were talking. This is the actual area that they were speaking to each other in. We can't access it yet, but as you can see, there's a sticky note on the wall over there. So we will eventually get to see that and get to pick that up. Hello, White Reborn. Good morning to you. Hope it's going well. Nothing has changed on the other employees' Animus screens. The battle for Havana has been there since before, and finding the sanctuary as well.
Wow, this is going to change everything.
Already heard that dialogue. Wow, this is going to change everything.
Playtests go. Incredible. We were able to keep a constant stream of 5 gigs a second.
Of genetic memory data?
Alright, so we've already heard that dialogue. So far it seems that the NPCs don't have new dialogue yet. From when the game forced us to get out of the Animus the first time,
It's like the regulations say. They don't make these rules for no reason.
Yeah.
and having finished sequence 6 and then having a look.
That's enough to trigger.
White Reborn, you're doing good. 10 times you didn't finish Black Flag yet.
C'est quoi cette niaiserie d'artefact? Toi aussi, t'as eu ce mémo?
Je crois pas, non.
Tu travailles pas sur Ezio Auditore?
Non, je suis sur Aveline.
Ah ouais? Ben moi, j'ai reçu un mémo me disant d'arrêter mes recherches sur les dernières années d'Ezio pour me concentrer uniquement sur les moments où il est en contact avec ces artefacts de marde. Quelle perte de temps.
Now that's dialogue that I haven't heard in present day yet. They're talking about Ezio Auditore and Aveline as well. I can't understand French, but I know the words, I know the names Auditore and Aveline. White Reborn, you're doing good. 10 times you didn't finish Black Flag yet. Yeah, so the first time I played this was 2016 when I got an Xbox One, because I wanted to wait till I had an Xbox One before playing this, and Unity and Syndicate. So by the time I got an Xbox One, it was 2016. So I had 3 Assassin's Creed games that were brand new to me that I could experience back to back. So that was cool back then. But ever since then, I've played each game that I mentioned at least once a year since 2016. Black Flag, Unity, and Syndicate. And I wanted to do something special for this game this year to celebrate its 10th anniversary. So I've been doing these phases. So this is the 6th phase. The 7th playthrough that I was doing was the annual playthrough, which I've already done this year. And then there's a unique playthrough that I'm doing, which the next stream and final stream for that playthrough will be January the 6th, which will make it 4 months in real time since the time in the game that I'm up to where 4 months will have passed. So that's what the unique playthrough is all about. So technically that's the 8th playthrough this year, the unique one, but it won't be finished until next year. So it's kind of like just a parallel playthrough, because the way that the playthrough was devised meant that I wasn't able to fit that playthrough in the 1 year. So it's had to overlap into next year. Okay, I've already read that and that and that, but yet it's coming up with an exclamation mark for it. Already read that, and already read that.
Salut! The vacation rule in the handbook? What about it? Well, I think the idea is that you're supposed to love your job enough to put in the extra time. Don't say that so loud.
I don't remember hearing that dialogue before. That might have been the dialogue in the other stream that I missed, that I was hoping to get again, but didn't.
Exactly.
Feels like a high-tech company, finally.
Already heard that dialogue. White Reborn, what about the others, AC, like Origins? Yeah, so that came out in 2017, and I've done at least one playthrough a year since then for that game. Plus other ones, like I don't keep count of all the playthroughs I've ever done for all the games I've ever played over the decades, but I do know that with certain games I've played them at least once a year, if not anywhere upwards of 4 or 5 times in that same year. So yeah, Assassin's Creed 1, I've played at least once a year since 2008, because I didn't actually know about the series until 2008, which was cool because I didn't have to wait as long for Assassin's Creed 2 as fans of AC1 had to wait when they first played it in 2007. So I've played Assassin's Creed 1 at least once a year since 2008. I've played Assassin's Creed 2 at least once a year since 2009. Same with Brotherhood since 2010. Same with Revelations since 2011. Same with AC3 since 2012. Wanted to wait till I had an Xbox One before getting Black Flag, even though it was on the Xbox 360, which was very, very difficult not to want to get it, I can tell you. So I've played Black Flag, Unity, and Syndicate at least once a year since 2016. And I've played Origins at least once a year since 2017, Odyssey at least once a year since 2018, and Valhalla every year since 2020, at least once a year. And I've played Mirage twice this year already. First playthrough was offline to see if I would like the game from start to finish. Second playthrough was on stream to do my annual playthrough of it, because I decided, hey, it was a game I liked enough to do replays of. Liberation, though, I didn't play that till 2018, but I've played that at least once a year since then, the remastered version. And Assassin's Creed Bloodlines, which came out on the PlayStation Portable, I've played that the last 2 years in a row since first playing it. And Rogue, I played once when it came out and never want to play ever again. Yeah, White Reborn, yeah.
Go. Incredible.
Already heard the dialogue about the playtests. But yeah, in the lead up to that game coming out, I wanted to actually not buy it straight away until I had actually thoroughly researched it, including when it came out. And from what I had seen when it came out, I was like, you know what? This might be a game that I would want to...
I drove through it.
I'm thinking about moving there after my visa runs out here.
Already heard that dialogue. And I thought, well, I want to actually play through it myself, but I don't want to take the gamble of buying it outright. So I got it through Ubisoft Plus for Xbox. Because I figured, hey, if I end up getting the game through that and it turns out to be terrible and I hate it, at least I haven't paid full price for it. So that was my thinking in getting it via Ubisoft Plus. To give some context, in Australia, a brand new game is $100, and Mirage was going to be $80, which obviously $20 is a bit of a difference. However, still quite a lot of money. Ironic, though, that I ended up paying more for it overall, because by the time I finished it, via just basically, I guess you could call it renting it. In past time, you would say you rented something. I mean, you can say you rented stuff now, but in terms of that game, I essentially did like a rental of it, so to speak. And in playing it offline from start to finish, I was like, you know what? I actually like this game. And then I was willing to pay full price for it. So I ended up paying more for it overall in the long run. But I still feel it was worth it, because the alternative was to spend $80 straight up and potentially not like it. And I'd rather be in a position where I've paid a little bit extra with something that I actually enjoy, versus, you know, pay a big chunk of money and hate the game at all. So that's where having memberships to things like that can come in handy. Now, granted, the thing with Ubisoft Plus, it's confusing, because there's Ubisoft Plus and then there's Ubisoft Plus Classics. And Ubisoft Plus Classics is different in the sense that if you have PlayStation Plus or if you have Xbox Game Pass, then
I think so. He's super arrogant.
Then Ubisoft Plus Classics is also available to you. And so you're able to access games like Assassin's Creed, Black Flag, and Unity, Remaster of 3, Ezio Collection, you know, Odyssey, Syndicate, Unity, you know, you name it. Except for Assassin's Creed 1, you can't get access to that through Ubisoft Classics Plus. So that's that. But Ubisoft Plus on its own is a separate thing that only PC and Xbox gamers can actually pay money to access. And Ubisoft Plus made Mirage available through that on day one. So if you wanted to play Mirage on day one, but not outright buy it, if you had a PlayStation, sorry, if you had a Ubisoft Plus account and you were a PC gamer or an Xbox gamer, then you'd be able to actually play it day one without paying full price. So I went that route for the Xbox.
Infrastructure.
Okay, so there's no new dialogue since the last time we were out in present day. Hello, Sean.
Coffee was better in the old building.
Now that is good timing for that dialogue to come through, because Sean here is undercover as a coffee maker, barista, whatever the name you would want to call it, and all he's done to hide his identity from Abstergo is dye his hair. He hasn't changed, like he hasn't even bothered to grow like a beard or a mustache or, you know, put a wig on or anything like that. He's just, oh yeah, I'll just dye my hair, that should be good enough. He's usually blonde.
Playtests go. Incredible.
So whoever was here making coffee before Sean took over was making really good coffee. If you go by what the NPCs are saying here, where they're saying coffee was better in the other building.
Existing broadband networks straight into people's homes.
White Reborn. So why did you choose to play story games instead of online games like Fortnite, Apex, Legend, Overwatch? It's just mainly what I like about, you know, story-driven games that I don't like about games like that, you know, and if I'm going to spend hours on a game, I'd rather have some kind of, like, story reward by the end of it. It'd be like watching a movie without the sound from start to finish and being unfulfilled because I didn't hear anything that was actually happening, even if the visuals might have been good. So yeah, for story-driven games, because I'm also a fan of movies and have been since I was a child, it means that I'm more drawn to narrative-driven video games than I am. And obviously in the early days, and for me the early days of gaming was when I was 5 playing NES and growing up with that, and then playing Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis and Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1 and all that kind of stuff. The single-player experience is just something that I've had more interest in and more, I feel more rewarded by having experience than, you know, what you would get from a Fortnite or an Apex Legend or Overwatch. And in terms of being a streamer, I'm not interested in just streaming games simply to stream them. I need to have some kind of reason why I want to play the game. And if a game has a story, and not just a 5-minute story, but if a game has a story that is fulfilling and that I enjoy and that I like, I'd rather spend the hours experiencing that story than not. Plus, I personally would get bored after hours of running around the same game maps, shooting and everything. So I'm doing something new with the channel at the moment. And the new thing that I'm doing is I'm doing multiple streams that are short, so that when I'm actually exporting my VODs to YouTube, that those on YouTube don't have to sift through an 8-hour stream in one chunk if they want to watch the VOD. So I'm going to end this stream here, where I'm currently at. 3 hours and a half is a good ballpark of where I'd like this stream session or how long I'd like it to be. However, I am of course going to be coming back to do the next stream, but I want to take a little bit of a break before I actually come back with the next stream. So I'm going to take a 15-minute break and be back with another stream of Black Flag. And when I come back, we'll continue on with the story. And I'll probably do another stream, I think, today of Black Flag before calling it a stream day. But it's still Saturday here, so there's still plenty of time to get another stream in at least. So that's what I'll be doing. I just want to thank everyone for watching this stream. Definitely understandable if not everyone who's watching this now can come back in 15 minutes. You might have had to go somewhere in 10 minutes from now and you're going to be away for hours, which is completely fine. Thank you so much for watching this stream. I'll be back in 15 minutes to continue on with the story. I hope that those who won't be able to make it have a good one. There will be another stream of this on Sunday as well for me. So if you don't catch the next stream in 15 minutes and you see me streaming Black Flag after quite a few hours, then you know it's become Sunday for me. But yeah, this is where I'll end this part 2 of the Phase 6 for this playthrough, focusing on story. Hey there, Senny. Goodbye there, Senny. I'll be back. It'll be good to take a 15-minute break as well, because then I'll be able to take a break with my voice, because I've done a lot of reading and analyzing and all that kind of stuff. But I hope it's going well, Crooked. I hope you've been having a good day today so far. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will be back in 15 minutes with more Assassin's Creed Black Flag.